Okay, this month's meeting of the Northern Wasco County PUD is now in session. Is there a comment period?
Mr. President, we have received no public comment.
Okay. Additions or deletions to the agenda?
I believe Cindy has agenda adjustments.
Pull it, you want to do it now?
We'll have to pull it from the agenda if we're going to do that.
Okay. I need to withdraw my request for approval of all 7 policies. I emailed the union about the changes, asked for a couple of MOUs to clarify which ones did not apply to the union. The union said they didn't need MOUs. I'm not comfortable with that, but I want to give them that. So I need to put language in the policies clarifying which ones apply to the union and which ones not.
Okay.
So that first 7 policies, there's an 8th policy.
Yeah, that's just my 7.
So all the human resource policies, if we could please remove those from the agenda.
Okay. That is done. Okay. Old business, I have one comment on old business. I should make it official in the minutes that the general manager accepted the proposal for his next contract, and both the board and the general manager seemed happy with the outcome. So it is now official.
Thanks.
Okay, consent agenda. Is there a motion?
Also move. I'll second. We're on the same page anyway.
You pick. Yep, we got a motion and a second.
Move the second to the.
Motion, and then Howard second.
Okay, thank you.
Any discussion? Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Passed unanimous. Division updates. E&O and IT.
This will be quick tonight. We have a lot of things on the schedule. Pretty much business as usual in all 3 departments, engineering, operations, and IT. Nothing super exciting to report this week or this month, so I'm going to save most of that for next month. I thought what I would do instead is give you an update on the liability statistics that we report on periodically. You're going to be seeing a new set of those pop up in our next KPI report next month. So this will be some advanced relearning of what they are and what they mean and where we stand in advance of seeing those. And so I'll run through these fairly quickly. And there's not going to be a test. So as a reminder, basically what we do is we track all of our outages. We track what time it started, what time it ended, how many customers were affected, what the cause was. So we enter all this into a computer system online. We subscribe to the APPA system. It's called their e-reliability tracker. And through that, we're able to determine basically some indices that there's many different ways that the IEEE has put forward for how to measure a system's reliability. There are 4 primary ones that we use that I'll run you through. And they basically each crunch the numbers a little bit differently to tell you a little bit more about your system reliability. So the most common one is this one called SAIDI, System Average Interruption Duration Index. And I'm putting it in order of how fun the math is to how lame the math is. So the fun math at the top with the Greek characters, and then another little simplified ratio. But if you really want to boil it down, SAIDI is the duration of an interruption for the average customer served over a period of time. That's basically what SAIDI is. And so I put together a graph of the past 3 years. Normally SAIDI, all these indices are time-based, and the most common period to look at is a year. And so we'll have the APPA's annual report next year that I'll go through with you, like I did earlier this year. But we track on the KPI standpoint, we track quarterly values, which is fine. It's just that you can't compare a quarterly value to an annual value. So there aren't any real industry standards that I can look at for quarterly values. So what I've done for each of these, the red button, the laser pointer here. Okay, perfect. Don't want to do anything bad. So I have a little, you can't tell the screen, but trust me, average of all of our, quarterly values for the last 3 years. I just did a 3-year, look back because, in my research, it looks like that's the most valuable information we have. Before that, it was less reliable. And so, what you can see is we have an average right here, and this is in minutes, about 11.2 minutes. And each of these is one of the quarters, and so we want to be, ideally lower is better. And so, again, the national average is going to be up here off of our chart, and I'll show you that on the annual scale. But essentially, what you're looking at is we generally average right around here in this area, which is very reasonable. And with occasionally, we have these outliers here, which may look a little bit scary at first. I didn't intentionally make the graph look scary, but one outage can sway these for a month or for a quarter. If we have an outage like in June, we had the fire that affected one of our esteemed directors here. And it was a fairly substantially, it was a long outage, and so that threw the statistics off for that quarter. But then this last quarter was one of the best we've had in the entire, 3-year period. So that's why there's so much variation, because one outage can throw these off. So all in all, we're doing well. If I look at this, it does look like overall, if I were to draw a trend line, maybe we're coming up a little bit, but I would attribute that more to the amount of detail, the amount of emphasis we've put on reporting over the last 1.5 or 2 years. We have new leadership in every position in my division, and so we're doing things maybe a little differently than the past, and so we're recording more outage detail than we ever had in the past.
Jeff, do the AMI meters affect how that data is going to be?
They don't. No, well, the AMI meters are super helpful in assessing quickly how many people are out. So in reporting our outage, they're extremely. We had an outage today. Truck ran over a switch over on Crates Way. Really happy to see that happen. And how many customers were out? I looked on the analytics screen. Roger, do you remember how many were out?
11?
I was 7, but still, it's right there, 7. And so it makes when we report that outage, it's a lot easier. We don't have to trace through the mapping and try to count them all up and make it, try to get it right. It's much more accurate now. So it is helpful in that regard. And then I'm comparing this quarter in 2021 with quarter 3 in 2020, and we've improved. I wouldn't get super excited about that. Again, one outage can sway this. So the next statistic.
Quick question.
Yes, sir.
How many outages in those 3 years?
How many total outages? You would have to ask me a question that's not on one of these. I can get that for you. I'll have to get back to you.
Well, I'm just curious because I didn't see it.
We average, I want to say, when I put all this into the spreadsheet, we average probably 10 per month, 8 per month, something like that.
And that's not a lot, right?
It's not a lot. No.
That's everything from squirrels to
Everything. Squirrels,
turkeys to.
somebody runs over a switch,
Yeah.
to a fire, to storms, everything.
Yeah.
I'm only accounting for unplanned outages, not normal, scheduled outages.
Right.
Sorry about that.
Next. I should. Any suggestions? Thank you. Okay, the next one is called safety, and this one, again, I have the fun math at the top, less fun math in the middle. But basically, it works fine this time. What safety is the average number of outages experienced per customer over the period of time that we're measuring. So this is a frequency of outages for the average customer. And again, it looks pretty similar to the last graph. The numbers are kind of small, which is great. So basically what this says is in this quarter, and on average, in a quarter, you add up all of our customers, the likelihood that they will have an outage is basically 0.05. There are 0.05 outages per customer on average. And so right now we're at 0.02, below the curve. Again, I think I told you guys last month that it was the month of the year as far as outages go. So Q3 was all in all down. But again, we hover around this, and occasionally there are outliers. I wasn't here in Q3 2020. Somebody probably remembers the outage at that point. I can't remember. Was that the one? The September fire? Or the windstorm? The big windstorm that came from the south, right? So that's what caused this outlier here. The next one, Katie, is basically a ratio of the first two that I just showed you. And what it is essentially a measure of how long does it take to restore service on average to our customers. And so again, plot this one is more consistent, fewer outliers. Our average is just under 200 minutes over a 3-year period. So this is from the time the power is out until it is restored. And again, some of these are really quick. If the outage happens at 9 a.m. and we have a line truck out there, that we may have them restored in 20 minutes. If it happens at 3 in the morning, and there are many, if it's a complex outage, it could be hours, right? So this is an average. Again, we're hovering right about that. But again, I think if you look at it, if we draw a trend line, you probably see a slight increase. I want to be transparent about it and point that out, but also illustrate that, or explain that it has a lot more to do, I think, with how we're reporting the data than how our system's performing. And then the last one I want to talk about is ASI. This one is basically our percent uptime. This is our availability in percent. And so this should be 99.9 something. And so on average, we're about 99.99. With most of this is one of the graphs where we ideally are higher rather than lower. And so you can see most of the time we're above it. Occasionally we have these little dips due to events. One event can sway on a small system like ours, can sway the metrics for the quarter. But all in all, we're always, again, our minimum was 99.97% in that period. So exceptional performance. I guess I want to point out that this is why we do capital planning. This is why we do capital investments. We don't just spend money because we want to buy cool stuff. We like to buy cool stuff, but we like to do it for a reason. And you guys set the strategic objectives for us. And so system reliability is one of those things. And the biggest contributor to maintaining this or improving it is our investment into our capital infrastructure. So we thank you for your continued support of that program. That's really all I had for you tonight. Any more questions on reliability?
Okay. Jeff, when folks use the vernacular, the 5 nines, that's what they're referencing.
Yeah, 99.99999.
Yeah,
5 9.
Thank you.
Okay, finance and risk.
I'll be short, we can still hear a lot from me later. So we'll touch on budget rates and risk coming up here in a few minutes. I won't touch on those. Had a good month of August so far, year to date. Net income is right around 1.5 million. We have and our forecast for the balance of the year is about 2.6 million by the end of the year. That's our estimate. Puts us a little bit behind, puts us behind what we had budgeted, but we have load changes and other factors that come along. But so far, we're doing actually very well. Just want to mention too that we have new staff and new positions. We even have one member of the staff that is relocated back to South Carolina, who's working with our purchasing, and she's going to continue to work with us remotely. And she's helping to set up our purchasing structure. And that's Otisha Haynes, and she's partnering with our future, basically our training, actually helping to train our current purchasing specialist, Natisha Fanene, who's an internal candidate who got promoted. So that's always the good thing when you see people trained and skilled, you're able to see them move up in the company rather than get people from the outside. They're looking to pull together, again, they're partnering with the other divisions to just to develop some more structure around our purchasing process and how we do it, continue to ensure compliance with changing laws and regulatory issues. That's part of risk compliance. Also, just ensuring that all of our purchasing stays competitive, because by Oregon state statute that we have to have at least 3 competitive bids for anything above $10,000. We have a lot of volume of purchasing that goes on between the 1,000 and 10,000, a lot of volume. And so it's important that we actually do a little bit of diligence there. And even a little bit of diligence there continues to make that really worth the while. And that's something where she's also added some structure, some discipline, and staff has been really supportive of that, as well as management. Just again, to continue to review and continue to develop purchasing administrative rules and templates to make that a pretty streamlined process. But new staff's doing really well. We're getting people cross-trained, things are going really well. So, and that's all I have for my updates, because you're going to hear a lot from me on the rates, budget, and risk.
So I have one comment about what Outage has been doing. Is she shared with me to review the procedure manual, and my first run through it is really well done.
Good.
I've got to do a final run through on it, but
sure.
The quality of the work is really high.
Excellent.
Yeah.
All right.
Thanks, Howard.
Okay.
Right. Thanks
See
very
you
much.
later. Our resources.
Hi. Yeah, this is Kurt. I'm reporting from home today, and hopefully you can hear me. If you can just give me a shout, let me know if I'm coming through. Okay, are you hearing me okay now?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay, great. We'll start out with hydro performance. The plants are both running and are in excellent condition and producing energy at very high capacity factors. We've begun planning for the winter outages. We have tentative dates from the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. At McNary, it'll be December 27th, 2021 through February 3rd, 2022. At the Dalles Fishway, it'll be January 17th, 2022 through February 28th, 2022. These are normal timeframes that were given by the Corps of Engineers. The duration of the outage typically is shortened as we get into the outage period, and the scope of work becomes more clear. At McNary Fishway, we have the ingress egress project, which is the elevator stairs proposal that the Northern Wasco County PUD, as the owner operator, has been promoting. The engineering plans are at the Corps of Engineers. We're seeking a permit to begin construction. We expect best case scenario, a permit would be forthcoming from the Corps of Engineers at the end of October 2021. We have been requested to hold a meeting with Klickitat PUD and one of their commissioners at the project next week on the 13th at 10 a.m. And Klickitat has also requested that one, or I believe maybe 2 of our board members could attend without creating a quorum. So that's an item for discussion. If you'd like to discuss that now, I'll pause. Otherwise, I'll continue through the power resources report, and then we can go back to that.
Why don't we come back to it?
Okay. The Dalles Fishway projects include a trash rack rake. The Corps of Engineers will be turning over operations and maintenance of a piece of equipment that's used to clear what's called the trash rack at the intake to our project. It keeps branches and sticks and brush and dead animals out of the intake structure at our project. The Corps of Engineers has had difficulty consistently maintaining the equipment over the past few years, and we reached an agreement where Northern Wasco would take owner or operation and maintenance responsibility for that equipment, fit it with a new power cord, and we'll begin procuring cord reel assembly to make that happen after we receive the written amendment from Corps of Engineers. We also have the juvenile fish sampling facility at the Dalles Fishway. We're working on construction, which was authorized to start October 1st. We've cleared the site and staked the project. We'll be continuing with procurement efforts and employing local contractors to complete that project. We also delivered an annual operation and maintenance plan to the Corps of Engineers last week, and that's the plan that describes current work that we're planning for the project during the maintenance outage, also some of the special projects that I just mentioned, and it also provides the Corps with updates to our standard operating procedures. Power Resources Division has also been working with Finance on the cost of service work that will be presented by GDS later on. Power Resources provides Finance with the Load Resource Expense Model, or LRE, which is a load forecast, power purchase and transmission expense forecast driven by load, and then a retail rate revenue forecast, which is also a derivative of the load forecast. We have the scheduling agent agreement, which was authorized by the board a couple of months ago, and that agreement was executed with Portland General Electric last week, and Portland General Electric completed the initial set of energy schedules that started flowing on Friday, October 1st, last Friday. And we've developed Northern Wasco submittal protocol that will handle how we submit scheduling data based on power purchases and transmission reservations. We'll be submitting those monthly to Portland General. And finally, the Northern Wasco put together a REC offering that concluded last week, and we are contracting to sell 53,750 renewable energy credits. They are from the Dalles Fishway, BPA Wind, BPA Incremental Hydro in the 2019 through 2021 vintages. In 2021, the revenue from these sales will be approximately $49,000. In 2022, the revenue is projected at $36,000, and that's a unit contingent revenue estimate. The total revenue estimate between now and April 2022 would be $85,000 in renewable energy credit sales revenue. And that completes the Power Resources report. So we should go back up to the item regarding McNary Fishway ingress egress project and the meeting on the 13th at 10 a.m.
Okay, I personally feel that the pictures that you showed were very good as far as what it looks like. If I were in town, I would go up there, but I'm going to be up in Washington, so that's not an option. Are there any other board members who would like to make that visitation?
I'm kind of like you, I'd love to go see it, but I kind of have a job, so I'm kind of tied down a little bit.
Sounds like the board is pretty happy with the presentations you've made in the past, Kurt, and I think we have a pretty good idea of what needs to be done and why it needs to be done. So I'm not sure you'll have a board member that'll want to come up there.
Okay. I will report that back to Clickitat that, and at this point, I will plan on going there with Chris Allen, and we'll have the discussion with the Clickitat staff and board member.
Okay, thank you.
If there's any change, let me. Yes.
Greg, I'm just wondering, do you know why they're requesting one of us go to the meeting? Sacrifice.
You want me to jump in, Kurt?
Yeah, go ahead, Roger.
So when I spoke to my counterpart at Clickitat, it was through a conversation with he and one of their commissioners, Commissioner Dan Gunkel, that just having some maybe trouble fully understanding the depth and breadth of the work that needs to be done. And there's still this belief that, if direct involvement with the local on-site Corps of Engineers representatives may be able to sway them into doing that work. I think we've articulated to you, and you guys have a full understanding of that's just not how their budget process works. And even though the folks on site that may want to execute this project, it's not for lack of want, it's for lack of ability. And but frankly, we can huff and puff all we want to, but it's not going to change anything. It's our staff, jointly or individually, that is at risk by continuing to delay this project, and feel very strongly about the quality of the work that's been placed before you and your acceptance and understanding of it. And I'm happy to continue to convey that to our partners there. And at least my counterpart would be fully understanding if you guys chose not to go.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I think that's it for you, Kurt. Thank you, unless you have something else.
Well, I will get back to Clickitat with a response, and we'll also extend an invitation out to the Corps of Engineers project management officer there, and he can, I think, respond to the questions about what the Corps may or may not be willing to do. So thank you very much. Appreciate your consideration. And that's all for my report.
Thanks, Kurt.
Thank you.
Yep, good night.
Okay, Corporate Services, Cindy.
I don't have much. A couple of the items are both important and very good news. First off, job descriptions, another little update. We've been working with Justin on a new job description in the new template and trying to also use that to fine tune some of the standardized language, and it is going well. So we do have our first just about full job description in the new process with all the new legal language and categories and everything else. So that's moving along. The transfer of the 401k plan to NRECA began Monday morning. Juliana at NRECA received everything that she needed. At this point, no news is good news because it means she is not finding problems and she is head down allocating all the funds. I can tell you, even though I knew that it was supposed to be there, logging into the administrative website Monday morning and seeing $0 in our 401k was very jolting.
Are you ready to leave?
But yeah, everything is moving along there finally.
Do you have any idea when that's actually being?
She thinks that it will be before the 30 days are up.
Really?
That she usually gets that done. She said when she only does one at a time. She never schedules multiples of these at the same time. She's head down until it gets done, and she will let us know as soon as it is ready to go. If you don't yet have your online account set up with NRECA, cooperative.com, strongly urge you to do so because that's where your retirement money is going to be if you have one of those accounts. It's also a great place to get more information on your insurance. So it'll be a one-stop shop for many of our benefits now. Last but absolutely not least, we received a letter from the union asking to open up the contract for bargaining wages only. And what that means is they are happy. They just want to bargain wages for the next 3 years, get it done and move on. They don't want to change anything else. So, I mean, we've got things I think set. The last session went well. You know, there was a lot of back and forth, but it went well. We've done a lot of work building that positive relationship, and I think which also bears out in the when they asked to bargain retirement, and all it took was a conversation, and they went back and said, okay, never mind, we'll take it. So we're in a very good spot there. We talked this morning about our list of bargaining wants and decided there was nothing on that worth pushing back and saying, no, we want to open the whole thing. So I'll be reaching out to the union and scheduling some wages only bargaining sessions.
Cindy, is this the first?
First since I've been here.
I don't remember ever doing that.
So
It's a positive thing.
very positive. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Customer Services.
Oh boy, show and tell.
Yeah, show and tell.
Not this yet, don't get all excited
Giving
now.
stuff away.
Oh, man.
Not taking.
Free baseball hats.
Door prize? Come on, Justin.
That's the end, high score win.
All right, customer service by the numbers. So I tried to blow this up a little bit for everybody, to see the numbers a little bit better. We did see a reduction in overall, calls that the office received, as well as our call center service. It's just a little month, so, that was just one of those things. Our service, connects and disconnects, pretty much equaled about that. And again, we saw a little bit of reduction, so it's probably just timing of year and things like that. One thing I'd like to point out, can you click on the payment analysis? So what we are seeing though is a continued trend in how we receive our payments. And I'm not golf.
Here,
There we go. Is the cash register. So it's not necessarily attributed to traffic of customers coming into the office. It's now a lot of that's driven by Dropbox and other payments that we receive over the phone from customers. So that has been a trending upward scenario there for us, which translates into really good management of past due amounts. This little graph right here, I know it's real small. Next time I'll have it on its own. What this does is it represents on the days of the week and then the time of the day of when we start to see the record by hour of customers. And I thought that would be interesting to start to look at just as how we see customer interactions with us here at the utility and what drives potential customers on their workday and how that may impact us in our workday.
Does that also show the day of the week that's the busiest?
Yeah, so Monday, Tuesday, again, apologies for this, really, for the small. Gray is Monday, so Monday is right here. Pretty minimal, but again, so this is 12 o'clock on to 6 o'clock. On all of these, they always trend up. Tuesday, it starts to about the same. We start to really see things, Wednesday, not too much, but really Friday, early on, things spike up, but then they reduce down towards the end of the day. So, again, kind of some things to look at as we manage our business operations.
Is that peak, that's at 4 o'clock?
Yes, that's at 4 o'clock. So, again, customers may be trying to do business with us as their workday is trying to end, knowing that we, potentially close at 5 o'clock. So, again, it's just how customers are reacting to us and doing business with us.
And a reminder that maybe that Friday traffic, we also do disconnects on Thursday right now, so those two are directly proportional. Correct, and gathering this data and having some more informed information will help in that decision-making process.
And, this is mainly driven on how we interact with the customer, the disconnects, how we communicate out with our mass notifications. So again, it all is really kind of, it shows when we communicate to the customer and how they respond.
Right?
Yeah. And then go ahead and scroll down here. So here's our age balances residential. Scroll just a little bit more. We're pretty close to what we were last month in terms of not much in terms of total unpaid. Slight decrease in 30 days, just a little bit increase in 60 and a slight decrease in 90 days. So again, it just goes to show the communicating out to the customers and working with them on arrangements, getting them in contact with our CAP office. And so just communicating a lot more with our customers. And CRC also has been really nice in getting them educated in how they relay the same message as if a customer was to call our office, they're relaying the same kind of message on their end. So that's been showing to be very helpful. Okay. Then we'll go to the commercial. Commercial, again, pretty minimal in terms of what I would consider movement, aside from this time, compared to last year, really big, significant numbers. So again, we only have a few businesses that were on that. One of them actually, we are working with them on a payment arrangement to help them manage their past due amount. And that's kind of one of those nuances where businesses, if they reach out to us, communicate to us, we certainly don't want to disconnect them, but they made the first step in reaching back to us. So we responded and wanted to help them and trying to work with them on a payment arrangement to get them caught up on their past due amounts. Okay, scroll down. And this just is kind of our programs that we have, neighbor to neighbor, still pretty minor. And the reason why to that is there's a lot of federal assistance money still available that is getting pledged to customers. So customers are still able to contact the CAP office and get help there. So we have a hand to leverage that.
Proportionally, where are we on that compared to last year when we had a big shot of that federal money?
Oh, in terms of total in our neighbor to neighbor, I can get that back.
Just ballpark it.
I would say close to probably 28,000. Whereas last year we were probably 24. Okay. So it continues, while it's being used minorly on a month-to-month basis, it's still continuously incrementally increasing. And I probably am off on that. It's probably a little bit higher. So, but I'll make sure I put that on there. And then I put on there the customer deposits. This is out of our customer service policy, and that's how we determine how we return a customer deposit. It's a automatic thing now within our system, and I just show this in terms of what we return back to customers on a monthly basis for their service deposits. And then finally, our small business assistance program. I would say that I'm entering into the sunset phase of the program. The majority of the businesses have had their consecutive 3 months of credit issued to them and or the maximum amount that we allowed. I have just a few remaining businesses that were kind of staggered in, and I'm estimating the remaining credit to be about $1,600 that will still apply to them. So again, businesses super very appreciative of everything the PUD has done for them. So they say thank you to always to pass that along. And then this survey, I'd like to say there's been new responses, but there hasn't. Part of that, I just haven't done a real hard campaign out to customers. And it was more of a pilot in utilizing our mobile app. As we look to revamp our customer portal will have a new feel, more user-friendly look to it. We'll do another customer survey, just small kind of things, and then make that more active. Maybe we'll start to look at, incentives to customers to try to engage the feedback to that. Okay, energy management. Energy management. Okay, right off the bat, lighting kits. So there was lighting kits, we contract with Energy Services Group, and they do a lot of our promotional kits that we send out to customers. And this is one of them. It was a lighting kit, and the lighting kit shows up to the customer's doorstep. It now has a tag. Before there was no tagging, and customers would tell us, "Hey, what is this box?" Or they would send it. They would drop it off on the front of our door, and they were afraid to open it, and rightly so. They didn't know if it belonged to them or not. So now that it's tagged, but it's got LEDs in it, and it's really a pretty thorough kit with LEDs. The one thing that's not in here, and I'm not sure why the advanced power strip is not. I think it got utilized somewhere else. So.
For your PlayStation is just
yeah, well, it's not mine. I haven't gotten mine yet.
But little things like, a flow restrictor, you know, for the shower, a little device. So those are just little things. But the big thing, is LEDs, and then there's a little informational thing, describing to customers, really, the idea behind it. And so this is something that ESG provides to us, and, they're continuing. They manage the list of customers that have received these, and they try to do areas within our service territory and offering these to our customers.
Is everybody supposedly going to get one of these, or?
There is, as I was told, there should be no customer left behind. So, that'll be something, and I don't have a timeline but that will be something that I can certainly bring back to the next board meeting in terms of, because there's, it seems like a lot of customers to be able to, in essence, hand deliver these to, but they've been doing a lot and delivering a lot to our customers.
Who's doing the delivering?
ESG. So they're actually the company that we get these from. So
It's not like FedEx or?
No. Yeah, they're actually doing it themselves. So, but yeah.
If I could, so when Lance and Travis came to me with this was a while ago, this was back when I still had energy management. We tried it out as a pilot. You know, we picked like one small, like duper. We picked an entire area, but did it as a pilot, and response was positive. We also, instead of shipping, did kind of an in-person few hours with a truck and people to answer questions and whatnot at Saliva Village. And not only to help with energy conservation, but also help build that relationship. And that went over really, really well. Then we started looking for the money to expand it. And I don't know where they're at with it now, but we did pick, some multi-unit apartment buildings, duplexes, and sent it out. And then suddenly everybody's posting on Facebook, how do I get mine, where's mine? And so they put in a card in a rural light that says, if you want one, mail this in, you'll get one. So I think that kind of.
Yep, and then there's,
I'm not sure where they're going
a
from
link
there, but
as
there's
well that points customers to it to request it, and then they manage the list on their side. And yeah, they just start going, and I'm sure some of this is also on their end procurement-wise to be able to get that much supplies put together, and then they make the trips down to the towns and deliver them to customers, so.
nothing but positive on social media about the program.
Yeah, so it's a great thing.
And ESG is part of Pioneer Utility Resources.
There's a connection.
Yeah, it's
The same folks that help us with rural light and a lot of the other things that we do.
Our website.
great interview to work with, so. Thanks for the perfect segue. If you want to click on the traditional guide. So, a lot of the work that was put behind this, I got to attribute to Travis. It was really everything that he had and what he wanted to put together to really get information to the customers. So he worked with Pioneer Utility Services to put this together, and it was mailed out in the rural light as something that customers could actually pull out, use it as a guide. We will have extras in the building here for customers just to grab.
If I may, that is excellent.
Yeah.
Whoever put that together, should be complimented, because that's a great handout. It's easy, people can follow it, and you can get whatever assistance you need.
Mm-hmm.
Perfect.
It at least helps give the customer enough information for the first questions that they may have. And then from there, then they can reach out to Travis or Caesar directly, or even myself, and then lead them down kind of that path. So
Wonderful PR.
yeah, it's great.
Well, more than that, wonderful application,
Yeah,
actually,
you're right.
doing conservation.
Yeah. Yep. So
Good stuff.
we'll actually have a reprint to this. There was, that when they were putting it together, they transposed one of the preferred contractors' numbers on in the back. So we'll have a reprint to this, hopefully maybe in the next month. There's also maybe a little bit of sculpting to the readability of it with some of the print. It seems to be a little tight. But this is our first iteration. So overall, super happy with it, and I think customers will now be armed with that information, aside from, going to the online, where all this
And if you really look at that closely, the quality of paper is up a notch or two versus the Ruralite. So whoever developed that thought of a lot of different things, because that's gonna last for a period of time.
So that's what we wanted. We wanted it very similar to the calendar that we put out in the Ruralite as well. The calendar has a little bit heavier weight to it, so it has a little bit more robust hardiness to it. I think it's still a shade too off of the weight, but it's pretty close. But yeah, I'm super happy with that. So is Travis. Okay. That was literally just came down to this week. Yeah, they were shipped out.
Yeah, I think I got my rural like yesterday.
Customer story. So I'd like to, I'll read this, I'd like to share a customer story.
So I've asked Caesar and Travis to give me just if they have an instance where they dealt with a customer or a situation that not necessarily stuck in their head, but just goes to kind of show the extra little mile that they do in helping our customers. So I kind of took out the names, made it a little bit more third person here. PUD customer helped their father get an assessment done on his house. After the assessment was completed, a virtual rebate eligibility assessment report was sent to the customer explaining the specifications required to meet our program needs to qualify for a rebate. The windows were the customer's priority at the time, so a clear understanding was ensured that the windows had to have a U factor of 0.3 or below to qualify for a rebate, along with a registered installers list of contractors that had good feedback from customers if they had been used in the past. So that is something that we take a lot of pride in those contractors in providing. It was further communicated that if there was any questions or concerns along the way, to feel free to contact the energy management team. While looking through the paperwork submitted, the customer was realized that the windows had a U factor of 0.31. He's saying 0.01, not a big deal. It is a big deal. Unfortunately, they did not qualify for the rebate. The customer was contacted to let them know that the windows that were installed did not meet the requirements needed to qualify for the rebate. A few days later, the customer responded back extremely frustrated with the PUD because they chose one of our registered installers. So in their eyes, it was the utility's fault. To get a better understanding on the situation, the contractor was called. They communicated that the windows were purchased from a local hardware store and that they never had issues getting windows that qualified for the PUD program. In wanting to make the right for the customer, both contractor and energy management team contacted the hardware store to see what happened. It was realized at the store that a new employee had entered the wrong U factor when putting the order into the system. The hardware store apologized for the mistake and agreed to pay out the rebate for the windows that did not qualify. The contractor provided the order sheet, so a determination could be made on what windows did not or did qualify and what windows the hardware store would pay for in terms of a rebate amount. Not huge dollars when we talk about it here, as the customer had 104 square feet of windows installed. So with the $6 per square foot totaling $624, he ended up rebating $261 and the hardware store paying $362 in the end. In the end, it's the working relationship between the PUD, the contractor, and even the customer, because we wanted to make sure that we reached back out to the customer and said, hey, we're going to make right by this. And we're going to try to find the answer of what happened. Where was the missing link to this? So I just wanted to present this to you because these are the things that Travis and Caesar do. They truly go the extra mile in working with our customers and working with the contractors to try to bring our programs, our energy conservation programs to them. So just wanted to bring light to that. And all the rest is just what, so these are actually only the projects and rebates that energy management did up until literally halfway through September because of the BPA invoicing for their fiscal year ending. So these numbers are a little augmented of that just because the way BPA fiscal year ending is and everything for submittal of paperwork happens, kind of cut some of our stuff short. And there you go. That's what I got. Any questions?
Good.
Thanks for not letting us be the bureaucrats that didn't qualify someone for .01 and leaving that as their taste in their mouth when they're relationship with us, so thanks for.
Okay, thank you.
Great job on Mr. Wee.
General Manager.
Good evening. I know we have plenty of more fun ahead, so I'll keep it short. I just wanted to acknowledge and thank the board for continuing to trust in me. I think we've done a lot of excellent work on behalf of the customer owners and for the district, and looking very much forward to the future. So thank you for at least 3 more years. How's that?
And thank you for accepting our offer.
Of course, of course. Strategic plan update, I will have a draft for you in the next board packet. Staff and I reviewed it today. They caught some typos and stylistic differences that we had in there. I hope that you're pleased, but it's an ongoing dialogue. It's not meant to be a hard shift of the direction of the organization, just a refinement. So looking forward to sharing that with you. And lastly, you've been asking for this, Director Johnson, and I've been hiding it from you because this is the only fun I get out of the whole thing, is you completed your certification, the first step in our ECA, and you've been looking for the certificate, and it's my fault because I was hiding it so I could do it in public. Thank you. Director Gregory L. Johnson is a Certified Cooperative Director Program Certificate Completion recipient, and I know it's a lot of hard work and time that you put in, and even though we're not a cooperative, I know there's a lot of great things to learn, and it's part of the ongoing growth and learning of the organization. So thank you very much. Thank you.
So he's no longer certifiable, he's certified.
I'm sure, yeah.
4 out of 5.
You're next, Howard.
You will be there for us, man. Okay, that completes the GM report.
Report, sir.
Okay, presentation by Q Life.
All right. Good evening, Mr. Heggie.
Okay. I think Pat, I will get up here, if this is okay. I think we have there we go. So I'm Scott Hagee, I'm a Wasco County Commissioner.
You guys need chairs, grab those or whatever.
No. Oh, I'm fine. We're fine.
Okay.
Stand?
Okay.
Okay. So I'm also the president of Q-Life, and my name is Matthew Cleaves. I'm the Administrative Services Director for the county, as well as acting Q-Life administrator. And if you go to the next slide. So what we'll talk about today is kind of an introduction about Q-Life now. Well, we'll get there. And then we'll talk a little bit about our strategic plan. You guys have a strategic plan as well. Update it. So we'll talk a little bit about ours. We've just updated ours. We'll talk a little bit about some of the interactions that Q-Life has with the PUD directly, and then a little bit about some of our current projects, and then a little bit about moving forward. So you can go to the next slide, I think. I'm going to let you do this. Oh, I just wanted to interject a little bit of humor into the PowerPoint presentation. So as you can see, someone has dug up a lovely section of fiber conduit or fiber from the underground here, and they said, "Nature is beautiful. Found these unique roots while digging in my backyard." Does anybody know what kind of tree makes these? And so people who have stuff in the right of way that get damaged or dug up from time to time, I just found that one a little amusing, wanted to share it with you. Thank you. Next one. Luckily, if somebody does that, they don't get electrocuted. So, unlike you. So before we get to the strategic plan, so Q-Life is a organization that's currently comprised of the city and the county. And I always talk about this story because some of you were here at the time. But the PUD, really, I give a lot of credit to the PUD really to start this whole discussion about our community. Back in the day, I don't even know when it was many, many years ago. We really had one incumbent carrier in the community. Might have been Sprint, it could have been United Telephone, it was one of those, and they were the only kind of telecommunications provider for our citizens. And there was a lot of frustration because people would see that what was happening in big cities, and these people were getting, these internet connections. What are they? But they were not really available out here, and if they were very expensive. So PUD actually, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you guys helped fund kind of an initial study with the community college to look at this whole idea of what is broadband, what does it mean for our community, and how can we participate in it. So thank you for that. That was the start of things. Kind of moved along. It was, the port was involved in that as well. And then over time, the organization kind of took off, and the port and the PUD kind of stepped aside. And so the current organization is the city and the county. And so we are basically what we describe as a middle mile provider of infrastructure. We don't generally provide like service to end customers. That's not generally what we do. We try to build out the kind of the pipes and then work with the private sector, ISPs and other people that would actually connect up businesses or, you know, actual households. So we don't do that. So we did our, we updated our strategic plan. I'm going to get a little closer so I can read it because I haven't memorized it. And so this is kind of just the format of it. And I wanted to read the vision because I think the vision is kind of what overrides us. So the vision says, every address in Wasco County can enjoy a higher quality of life and participate in education, healthcare, and the economy through a high-speed internet connection at a price point that they can afford. And it's high, it's noted down below, ideally 150 megabytes per second. And I don't know how many of you may or may not be technologically, but 150 megabits per second is a pretty fast connection. But as you know, like everything has gone up. At my house, I live up in the sticks, and I get 5 megabytes per second. And that's the highest speed I can get. And I keep saying, wait for the day when I can actually get something like this. But,
Me too.
yeah.
You know where I live.
But our goal as Q-Life is to somehow work towards that kind of as our vision. We have a mission, we have values, but in terms of when we talk about our goals, we have goals. The first one is to maintain what we currently have. So as you, I mean, it's very similar to the kind of business that you guys are in. If we don't maintain what we currently have, well, you're kind of going to be kind of sucking in the end because as stuff crumbles, you're building new stuff and you can't maintain what you have. So our main system was built in the Dalles. It basically serves the whole of the community. We have a loop. We're actually building out, and Matthew talked a little bit about it, we're building out additional connections to provide more redundancy, but our main system kind of circles the whole Dalles, and we we have primary partners, which I'm not sure if the PUD is a primary partner.
I was just going to say, you pointed out that you're middle mile providers, basically, and you work with end users, right? Like ISPs, not just going to plan for that our internet connection does use one of the end users that relies on Q-Life's network. So we do have a connection, but not directly.
Cool. So we do have some direct, like Wasco County is a direct client, the city is a direct client, the hospital is a direct client, the school district is a direct client. So there are some people that partnered at the very beginning, put in money, and those are the people that we actually provide direct services to. Everybody else pretty much is served through someone else, like GorgeNet, LSN Networks, and some other folks out there. So first thing we do is we got to take care of our current network, and that's what we do. We spend a lot of money, like you guys do, on capital plans to make sure that when we have breakages, we fix them and upgrade and enhance what we have. A lot of electronics that kind of are what we work with as well. And then the next thing is to expand our network and try to employ alternative solutions. And that's kind of where it comes back to. I think the primary reason that we're here tonight is really we want to have a partnership with really utility providers. Okay, so like you guys actually serve all of the, you know, between you and the co-op, you serve essentially all of the folks in the community, right? Years ago, rural electrification, you know, everybody didn't have power and systems were put in place. You guys work to basically provide it. Well, broadband is pretty much becoming more like that. So we're trying to figure out how do we kind of do the same thing on this broadband thing, you know, and what I would tell you is I believe that organizations like yourself and like the co-op are really a key to helping us, you know, collectively serve our communities because, you know, we need to provide it. You guys have, you know, lines and customer relationships and a myriad of systems that, you know, manage all this stuff. We don't have that. You know, we never intend to have that. But, and I don't know what the end result is. Roger was on our board for a while. I personally hope maybe one day we'll get him back because I think his knowledge is key to helping us kind of figure out how to do this better. But we need your help and we need the co-op's help. You guys serve a certain amount of Wasco County, co-op serves another kind. And I think somehow we need to work together to figure out how we're gonna do that to expand the network. The second thing is improve our ability to secure local and state federal resources. I'm sure you know, but I mean, in this last time of COVID, there has been so much money that has come out, you know, to do infrastructure-related things, and a lot of money has come out specifically to do with broadband, because as we went into COVID, people started pulling up in their houses and doing school and working from home and all this kind of stuff, and some people didn't have a connection that worked for them, or they didn't have the technology. So basically, we're trying to get that to that point, because again, even though we're all hoping to get back like we are tonight, where we're actually together, which is really nice, there's still going to be a lot of, you know, remote kind of things. And I think, you know, whether it be healthcare or education or whatever the case might be, it's important to do that. So we also, our fourth goal is for education and advocacy efforts related to broadband. A lot of times people just don't know kind of what it is and how to use it. We have a meeting, so our commission meeting's tomorrow. We have some issues going on in Shantico, and frankly, there's not a lot of good service in Shantico, and there's not a lot of technology in Shantico. So, you know, we're not sure how that connection's gonna go, but, you know, for those people that drive into the Dalles to come to our meetings, it's a bit of a challenge. So we wanna make sure that we can help educate people so they can not only have the service, but actually use the service, and particularly in the world of business and commerce. And then drive technological relevance by benchmarking. It's really just trying to continually improve, you know, our systems, what we have. A lot of what your staff, it sounds like, does an amazing job at, to, you know, to make ourselves better and better so we can provide a better service. With that, Matthew. Thank you very much.
I think I'll add on to that last piece. You know, one of the metrics that's used for certain connections, the 25-3 connection, 25 down and 3 up. As we set a goal of 150 symmetrical, we're trying to, you know, every few years or every so often look at what that expectation is and continue to improve. That's tied very closely on that one. We can have the next slide. So I'm going to go through a couple slides and just give you a sampling or a taste of some of the projects that QLife is working on. And as Scott Hagee said a moment ago, this is a simple image of the plant that we have in the Dalles. And so you can see the ring that we have, and that was one of the initial first efforts of QLife, was to build this ring and establish some of these connections. And so you can see that the plant has grown over time to serve different customers and take advantage of different opportunities. So that's the snapshot that we have here. If I could have the next slide. And one of the projects that we are currently working on, we're working on for a couple different reasons. So as you can see on the left, this is near the roundabout, coming up the hill there to the Dry Hollow and Falls intersection, and then going out. And so this project, we've undertook for a couple different reasons. So one of our main lines here goes down 2nd Street, going down by the Wasco County Public Works. And a recent project, relatively recent project that we completed, was successfully getting over the railroad tracks in I-84 to serve the new immediate care and the Lone Pine area. And so the fiber line that we have running down the 2nd Street is a pretty critical line. It's tight on capacity. And so when we were looking at this project here, it actually circles around and goes down Fremont Street and connects back in at that other major intersection there. So through one lens, we were looking at this line as another redundant backbone to provide that secondary route, as well as increase some of the capacity that we have going through this region. At the same time, we were keeping an eye on the development, the second development, I believe, that Curtis Holmes is doing. That's the development called the Grove, which I think has upwards of 100 different homes going in. I think it's 75, something like that. But this is the second development that they're working on, the other being over closer to Cirrhosis Park, where we've already completed a fiber extension there. But if we can build this line here, hit this high-density development there, and work on our potential residential options and serve this corridor, there could be some benefit there as well. So we kind of look at when we're selecting a project and trying to execute a project, we're looking through several different lenses that we have. And here is another project. My apologies that they're so small, but this is a project outside of the city of Dallas. And I just wanted to share it as an example and show you some of the work that we're doing in more southern Wasco County. project is, we're actually very hopeful, knock on wood for us, and keep your fingers crossed. We've submitted a grant to the NTIA for about $3.5 million. We're part of the state of Oregon application, which has 3 other projects as part of that application. QLife will be contributing a little over $1 million, and we have a public-private partner who will also contribute a little over $1 million to do the final fiber-to-the-home build-out in these center community areas.
Matthew, can I ask a question?
Of course.
The SpaceX has just been awarded, I think, through the Federal Communications Commission, Wasco County, essentially, if I understand correctly. And I don't know a lot about it, but I'm a little confused in terms of, are they in competition with you then in terms of providing this kind of service to the south part of the county?
I think I would say yes and no, kind of in both ways. So I think Starlink has certain applications in certain very remote areas where fiber for a single home is literally not possible. It'll never pencil. A SpaceX connection could be very beneficial. Where there is currently not fiber, SpaceX could be a very excellent solution. But there are some benefits to fiber that can either complement or be better than SpaceX. Security, the lower latency, the fact that there's one company that can provide a satellite connection kind of reflects some previous circumstances when there was one carrier. That's your only option.
Sure.
To go with.
Yeah.
Versus if you have fiber connections, you can have multiple different ISPs ride those. They can be a little bit more redundant. And it's a new technology, but it's something that we are watching closely.
The RDOF, which is what this is all about,
Yeah,
I think, yeah, that's funded through the FCC at $10 billion, is my understanding nationally. And this comes through the CARES program, is that correct?
Are you talking about the RDOF money or the
No, your
NTIA
money, yeah.
To be 100% honest, I was having a conversation earlier this week with Carrie Kipinich, and she was explaining to me the different funding sources and how the streams worked out between RDOF and the NTIA. So I can get a little bit more information back to you on the distinctions between those two. But you're absolutely correct. Starlink received most of the funding blocks for RDOF, whereas NTIA funding source, which is a $288 million pot, I believe was funded partially by CARES, and then there's additional money coming down the pipeline through RDOF.
What doesn't make any sense to me is if they're competing interests. I mean, what I hear you saying is that what you guys are gonna be doing is really, to a certain extent, different than what SpaceX would be doing or their subsidiary, whoever's doing it, in the rural community.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
Okay.
And I would just maybe delineate a little bit, so, for those of you who don't know Starlink, so they open up areas that you can actually apply and get these dishes, essentially. Lee Weinstein, who's on our board, actually just ordered one, was able to order one just the other day. We have some other people that participate with the county, actually, that have Starlink over in Washington, because they've had it for a while. And it's pretty good. I mean, compared to like having like no connection or a bad connection, they're really good. What our system potentially provides, the private partner that we're working with, for example, down in this project down here, and also in the Dalles, the standard connection that they provide is a 300 megabit synchronous for like $49 per month, which is pretty good. I mean, I pay more than that for my 5 meg connection, but but as important as that, so that's a good thing, right? And they provide, even higher levels first. But one thing that I was really impressed by is that there's money out there to do a lot of what you guys do, internally, is that if, let's say you are, your economic ability to pay based on all the standard kind of criteria is low, then they have money from the feds to actually help you pay it. So I think they told us that their cost for that same kind of connection would be like $9.95. So they're helping to try to get this, again, like you guys do with your power programs, right? To try to make sure that it's affordable for even people who really can't afford it. And that's what, our system will do, similar kind of things, that Starlink's $100 a month, everybody can't.
Well, and I think this district's position, since I've been involved in it, has been, we believe in public power, and we believe in the public entity, which really you folks are, Key Life is essentially, it's an intergovernmental agreement between the city and the county at this point.
Yep.
And so I wasn't trying to denigrate what you were doing, I was just trying to understand how it fit with.
No, that's why my answer in the beginning was
Yeah,
kind of yes and no. I mean,
Yeah.
it'll provide, Starlink will provide another option for a customer to use, to choose from. But they both bring different, pros and cons. So the NCIA grant that we submitted, we are hopefully, going to be hearing back, in November. And, if we're successful with that, we'll look to, extend from the Q-Life Maupin top or point of presence down in Maupin, to make that extension. And it'll also include the Wasco County Fairgrounds as well, which over the past couple of years has been heavily used, for fire response, not to mention benefits to users of the fair and the fair itself. I think I covered everything I wanted to on that one. And I also wanted to mention this topic or project because it's one of the ones that we try and keep on the burner and move to the front burner whenever we have an opportunity. And that's, as we all know, the Cascadia event. And so we've had some conversations about, everybody's, maybe not everybody's familiar, but there's PIDIC Internet Exchange in Portland. And this is a major nexus point or a major hub over in Portland that, for lack of a better word, has a high likelihood of being destroyed when Cascadia occurs. Now, the Dalles is just outside some of these orange, red, and yellow damage zones. So we've been looking at the possibility of establishing some kind of co-location or nexus point on this side of the Cascade that could benefit our community and could benefit our neighbors on this side of the Cascade ongoing. But during a Cascadia event, could be a recovery point, could be that connection point to help reestablish service or maintain service on this side of the Cascade. Along with that connection point of that nexus would be some kind of connection point moving east. That's unlikely for something to build, but it could be something that we could explore with other fiber providers such as EPA or Zayo or one of the other long-haul fiber providers that are around. So this is a topic that the community outreach team is taking back to Washington, D.C. from time to time, and one thing that we talk about and brainstorm and keep an eye out for any kind of opportunities to further explore. I think right on the list we have right now is looking to evaluate the potential of building a co-location space near Wasco County facilities, such as the Emergency Operations Center at 911, and looking for support to essentially have a feasibility study to explore that pathway, potential pathway. And so, like I said, those three projects, just kind of wanted to give you a sample of some of the things that we were working on. And with that, we'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Back up and talk about our interactions with you.
Oh, I'm sorry, I totally missed that one. Thank you very much. So I just wanted to express my compliments and gratitude on my excellent interaction with Roger. It's great to be a partner with him. But as well as Tom McGowan, we recently, recently finalized the full attachment agreement, and we had a great experience working with him, going back and forth on that full attachment agreement and reaching a place that we were all very comfortable with. And both with my Q-Life hat on and with my Wasco County hat on, I've had great interactions with Ed Ortega, and he's helped us with a number of different issues at the county. Very responsive, and just wanted to pass along my compliments to your staff.
Thank you very much. So with that, I guess we'd be happy to answer any questions.
Yeah.
And hopefully, this is the start of us kind of moving forward in, maybe a deeper relationship as to how we collectively, as Jim has mentioned, kind of as public-ish entities kind of serve our constituents.
Just two, Scott, if the new infrastructure, trillions of dollars comes through Biden, and will you see some of that for your broadband?
We certainly hope so. What Matthew's talking about is the early money, and, as more money becomes available, we're certainly going to pursue it. McKed is also working kind of on contract with the county, and so they have been kind of spearheading our broadband stuff and trying to find funds and everything. But yes, definitely.
Second.
Some of the work that we've been doing is to prepare for those different types of ground opportunities.
Okay.
You may know, and grant opportunity comes out, and the deadline's 30 days from now, and if we don't have something half-baked or in the hopper, it can be hard to meet those deadlines. So we have, potential routes, potential cost figures, for going out to Mosier. We've been working with Auburn Grid, the solar company down south, to see if there's partnerships there, and working our way into Shannico and Antelope, looking at, all these different areas that are currently lacking service, and trying to get things prepped for grant opportunities.
I'm sure you're aware that we are at least in the talking phase of working with the city and doing underground wiring, and I'm assuming you would jump in anywhere possible to coordinate it at the same time, if that comes about.
Certainly, certainly. So when I was actually over at the City of the Dalles, I was part of those conversations. I'm excited to see that effort still of interest. And, my technical management and I, we were talking about that the other day in conjunction with some of the work that the Urban Renewal Agency is doing on First Street and what some of those impacts and opportunities will be.
Good.
Any other questions?
I don't think so.
Cool.
Thank you very much.
Roger?
I just want to restate what you said. Hewlett has basically no staff, right? It's a county commissioner, a part-time, another county employee who's doing this along with the other 10 hats that you wear. You have like one technical resource, and then it's really just a collection of passionate folks that want to come together and see it continue to grow, right?
Correct. We have contracted engineering and technical management, but you are absolutely correct. The rest of the staff, our county commissioner, our admin services director, our executive assistant, Tyler, as the county administrator, he was handling a lot of that. Before that, Nolan Young, as the city manager, was handling a lot of that. So it is another hat that we do wear.
And so far, it's working okay, but we'll see.
Until I burn out. I'm just kidding.
Well, I just wanted to reiterate that we're able to execute on stuff because we're resourced for it and staffed for it, and we set priorities and we set goals and we give it assigned budget and resources and, policy guidance and executive oversight and execution. So for us, we can just do stuff. I very much appreciate how you have worked with us, and even I'm finishing year 6 now, where you communicated that, hey, the relationship wasn't always the best. Sometimes it's hard to get stuff done. We heard you, but then we resourced it, and now we're not in the way. So how we can continue to grow with you and support you and partner with you, I'm definitely looking forward to, because, could you imagine the last 18 months without safe, reliable power and broadband getting through it? So I see the nexus, I see the parallel and the alignment, and the board has always been supportive when we can put stuff in front of them that make good sense. So.
Excellent, and hopefully we can figure out ways to do more together. And as you can imagine, our system is pretty much mostly attached to your pole, so.
Right. Yeah. Thank you.
All right, well, thank you very much for the opportunity to let us chat with you a little bit, and if you ever have questions, most of you know me, and I'm certainly available to chat with you and Matthew as well. Of course. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so of the resolutions, which ones are we still considering?
Number 2, please. And you're done with 2, then you jump all the way to 10.
Okay. And is there going to be a little presentation on that, or are we just going to take a vote from what we had in our packet?
Wasn't anticipating there was a recommendations memo, but let me just open it up real quick.
Information security.
To revise the information security policy, this is one written and approved in 2016, and it's been revised, almost completely rewritten, to reflect modern security challenges that we face. It's something that needs to be revised more frequently, once a year, and we need to review it. So this is the first policy in a line of policies for administrative regulations that we're going to be rolling out to bolster our cybersecurity stance. So we recommend that you adopt it. It adds additional detail beyond what the previous policy added. It doesn't really subtract any substantial information. It adds it adds detail. And so it's more, shall I say, it encompasses more than the previous version did. And so we recommend that you adopt it.
Okay. Before we put up for motion, Scott, you guys don't have to stay for the rest of the meeting if you don't want. We won't be, hurt if you get up and walk out. Although it is a very interesting meeting that you may want to not, miss.
Well, I was just messing with Scott, I was gonna linger, but my wife just texted me that I need to get closer.
Okay.
Wow. Sure, here we are. Hey, good luck on that, man.
Scott, you can suffer.
All right.
He loves public meetings.
And he's a co-op customer, so he's really big,
Mr. President, I'd make a resolution, make a proposal to, accept resolution 25, 2021.
Okay, we have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
And a second. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Passed unanimously.
Can I make a mention? So basically, with the adoption of the updated information security policy, we will meet our 2% discount for the best practices with SBO. So we are in line for getting the 10% again this year. So I just need to go online, fill out the survey. We've already had staff, some of our IT staff has taken some additional cybersecurity training. So we'll have our 10% discount again this year.
That's good. That's good.
That 10% is worth about 15,000.
Yeah.
Okay, and then the 2022 budget.
So for the 2022 budget, we're going to have a remote. Lana's going to be presenting that from Texas.
Good evening. Hopefully you guys can hear me okay.
Yep. Yep.
Can you guys hear me? Okay, perfect.
Yes.
I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna turn off my camera and we'll just get straight to the presentation. So welcome to the first iteration presentation of the 2022 preliminary budget for Northern Wasco County PUD. There's, it's challenging to put budgets together with the world in which we've been living for the last couple of years. So we're really trying to move forward and focus on the future. Next slide. Sarah. With that, when we put our budget together, we try to look at some of our strategic plans, make sure we're identifying priorities. We're incorporating that into our budget. And for the 2022 budget, the strategic plans, bullet points that stood out were the emergency response and operational resilience, continued improvements in our supply chain and procurement programs, continue to expand employee engagement as our key resource, increase investments and focus on cybersecurity and capacity, and then, as always, our customer engagement and products and services. And so throughout the budget, I'm going to do my best to highlight some of these strategic plans and where they're identified in the budget. But those are the areas in which we really were focusing on and making sure we had those in our plan. Next slide, Sarah, please. So this budget assumes the following. So these are the assumptions that we used. We used an inflation rate of 3% on non-labor items and a 5% inflation for the labor. This year is the first year in which we really looked at, analyzed, and had several conversations with various managers and directors. And it was decided that we would remove all of our 10710 expenses. And what a 10710 expenses is our construction work in process items. So for those support individuals, those miscellaneous expenses that are incurred that help in our capital projects are not directly charged to a capital plan, we put them into an account that then is spread proportionately by percentage to each capital plan. In the past, that expenditure has been left in the O&M budget. And we've decided, because it's directly related to capital projects, we really do need to take those dollars out of the O&M budget and recognize those expenses in the capital plan, which we have done. So with that being said, in the past, we had already recognized about 30% of those expenses as part of the capital plan. So the remaining 70% is being moved into the capital plan, and you'll see that when that is presented to the board. But just acknowledgement that we have removed those expenses from this budget moving forward. And that in total was about $859,000 of expenses. So that approximately 600,000 got removed from this O&M budget. So that's some of that change that you're going to see in our net income. We do have exploratory costs planned that have been identified as capital projects. So as we start to do some exploratory review with engineers, outside services, et cetera, those are considered expenses as part of identifying the best route and the best plans to move forward on our capital budget. So those are identified as well in this budget, those exploratory costs for some of our capital projects. We're planning on moving to a more normal work environment, which basically equates to being able to travel to conferences, travel to training. So you'll see a slight uptick in our training for our employees, because we really are anticipating that we will be able to do more of that in-person networking and training for 2022. As you see, our revenue increased by approximately 17%, or $10,798,556 overall in our 2022 budget. Our labor increased by about 7% from the budget of 2021. Our non-labor O&M increased by approximately 19%, which gave us an overall net income that we're reflecting for 2022 of $2,966,000 and change. That is a reduction from our budget of 2021 of about $572,000. So just a quick snapshot of what the detail that I'm going to share with you next has rolled up to be. You could switch to the next slide. So the revenue budget itself, in looking at the various categories in which we budget, you'll see our admin credit was reduced by about 20%. That's mainly due to a credit that's anticipated to be received in the fourth quarter of 2021 from BPA. However, it's an allocation to our 2022 budget. So it's just a timing issue, and that's why you use it. It really is a credit that is in our 2022 budget, but we're going to recognize it in the Q4 of 21. Our non-operating is anticipating a reduction in our kayak. Again, that's construction and aid of about $285,000 is somewhat being projected. We are looking at an increase to retail revenues of about 18%, which equates to approximately $11 million. This is reflected as an overall customer energy usage increase of about 13.6%. And most of that is in our primary customer class. The Dalles Fishway, their output was put out to bid for 2022, and a third party was selected and identified that will be purchasing that output for 2022. This reflects the plan for sales of our RECs, our renewable energy credits. That should increase our revenue by about $223,000. this revenue budget that's being presented does not assume any retail rate increases for 2022. We put a chart together, if you could go to the next slide, Sarah. Just to represent and show the correlation of the average megawatt in comparison to revenue. So we've charted the steady growth the district has experienced since 2019 to 2021 actuals with, and to show also where the 2022 budget is projected, just to show the steady increase and the steady growth that we are experiencing as a district. Again, the increase in the retail revenue for 2022 is reflecting overall customer energy usage increase of about 13.6%. And we're doing the exact same thing with our average megawatt, but in comparison to our power purchase. And again, you'll see, oh, Sarah, if you could go to the next slide, sorry. So again, that's our average megawatt, which is the red line in comparison to our power purchased expense. Just again, in comparison that there's that steady growth. The first 3 years, 2019 through 2021 are actuals, and then the last column is our budget for 2022. For 2022, BPA energy costs did decrease by approximately 2%. So our purchase power did decrease by about 2%, and our transmission cost is showing an increase of about 6% over last year, just to give you an idea of what our power purchase is doing. We move to the next slide. This is our O&M labor budget. So again, this is the labor associated with non-capital projects. So overall, there was no significant change to the labor for 2022. There's no staff additions planned for 2022. And again, this represents a merit increase in assumption of approximately 0.05% over 2021, so 0.5%. Next slide. So again, as I mentioned last year, for those of you who might remember, in putting together the O&M non-labor budget, there's some discretionary expenses and non-discretionary expenses. The discretionary expenses, we have a little bit more control over. They're a little bit, we can plan to have, additional expenses in that area or not. Where the non-discretionary, those are really driven by other factors. And those other factors could be revenue, customer usage, our taxes, our, things like that, that again, they impact our budget, but we don't have a significant amount of control in managing those up or down each year because they are driven by other factors. So as a reminder, we did remove those additional support expenses for the capital planning project. So those are removed from these numbers. Computer support and supplies, you'll see has a pretty good increase. It increased about $305,000 or 86% over last year's budget. That's mainly due to adding some real-time security that we're looking at. Increasing our licensing, our software licensing due to the remote work environment that we're wanting to maintain and provide all those necessary licenses for all the computers. We now have the server backup maintenance hitting for 2022 because we installed the new backup server last year. We're looking at improving NeoGov and potentially adding an HRIS system. And our Power Resource Department, they have an increase in some of their computer software and licensing fees as well. So with all of that, that increases that category by about 86% from last year. I'm not going to talk to every single line. If you have questions, please ask. I'm going to I'm going to try to just hit the big changes and highlight those. The next one is the dues, memberships, and subscription. That increased by about 56,000 over last year. The significant increase on that came from the Oregon Department of Energy dues, which increased by about $25,000. And the Northwest River Partners dues increased by about $10,000. Again, as one of our strategic plan items or topics that we're focusing on is the education, training, and travel. And as I mentioned, we're hoping to get to a more normal environment. So that category is showing an increase of about $12,000, which over last year, in anticipation of being able to do more traveling for the conferences and training. The next category I wanted to highlight was the fees, licenses, and permits. That particular category, we had a decrease of about $9,000 due to the letter of credit with NIES, which expired in 2021. And that's maintaining our 15,000, that's including our expense of $15,000 to maintain our facility with Bank of the West that is approximately $15 million. So that's the change there. We did decrease that expense by about $9,000. Outside services, you'll see increased by about $285,000. Majority of that is due to the exploratory cost for those upcoming capital projects. We're looking at a new ERM system, and that's about $60,000 of outside services or consultation expense. A new SCADA. We're looking at, for 2022, the legal counsel increased by about 37, and that encompasses the general counseling and part of the labor bargaining. We're also looking at the scheduling agent for power resources, and that was about 63,000. And then just outside services for Trees Inc. is approximately 170,000 for fire mitigation and continued vegetation management. The other category that had a significant increase, again, is that power purchased. That increased by 8.7 million, and that's all based on our load forecast. And again, we're forecasting the 13.6% energy usage increase over 2021. So, next slide. Continued O&M budget expenses. The ones that I'd like to highlight is the public relations. That category increased by about 67,000. The focus there is on the school education and special events. That increased by about 20,000. Our economic development grants, we had a carryover from this year to next year of about 17,000 in recognition of funds being given. And that's just due to a timing of when one of the recipients is wanting to receive their funds. And then we had just the general magazine production and general marketing and advertising increase of about $20,000. The next category, again, this is one of those non-discretionary, which is the taxes. Those will be increased by about 400,000. And again, that's driven by revenue. So our franchise fees is anticipating to go up based on the forecasted revenue of about 330,000, and our property taxes to increase by approximately 69,000, and that's due to our capital projects being completed and having assets on our books. So overall increase of 11,250,000. And again, most of that's coming from our power purchase, which is 8.7 million, and the increase in transmission expense of 398,000, and our taxes of around 400,000. So that's what makes up that overall increase to our O&M non-labor budget. Go to the next slide. We just wanted to provide you some charts. We know some of you out there like that. The blue is the 2020 actuals. The red and orange is the 2021 projected actuals. And then gray is what we're projecting for the 2022 budget. And again, you'll see the ones with significant change are the ones that are also highlighted as our strategic plan initiatives. So computer, cybersecurity, and capacity, education, our outside services, our customer engaged program, which is the rebate program. Again, that's just due to a timing, but that is definitely increased. And then our dues and membership, as I mentioned, that's an increase. So these are what we would consider our discretionary expenses, which we have a little more control of, dial up or down. They're not as dependent on other factors like the non-discretionary. These discretionary expenses represent about 7% of our total non-labor O&M budget. We go to the next slide. This slide represents our non-discretionary expenses. Again, these are the expenses that are driven by other factors. These make up approximately 93% of our overall expenses, of the non-labor expenses. And these have a strong correlation or relationship to other drivers, as I've mentioned, the revenue, labor, and capital assets. So again, we just wanted to share with you how those look, how it's broken out, and where some of our big expenses are coming from. Again, power is recognized as a non-discretionary expense. Those are transmission, because those expenses are by our customer usage and anticipated, load. So with that, next slide, Sarah. Any questions?
And you'll get to see this again 2 more times before we ask for approval of the 22 budget.
Don't think we have any questions. Thank you, Lana.
You are welcome. Have a great night.
Thank you, Lana.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Okay, COSA.
All right, for our cost of service analysis, that's something that we do every year. It helps us to realign where are we at in terms of the budget you just heard, because this is a natural follow-through. Now that you've had a chance to see the budget that reflects how much revenue you need to bring into the district to cover our costs based on what our current rates are going to be, we employ, we have EES Consulting. We have Russ Schneider, who is coming to us from Montana, beautiful place to be right now. And he's going to share with us the results of his current cost of service analysis that is applied to for 2022. Hey, see you, Russ.
All right, thanks, Harvey. Can someone there tell me how my sound is?
You sound good?
Good.
Yeah, need more volume.
Can you increase the volume just a little bit?
All right. How about now? Is that better, guys?
Yeah, we got you. Good job.
Good. Okay, appreciate everybody's time, and I'm sure I'll see you guys in person here soon enough. Just a little background on me. I've been at EES for almost 5 years now, and I worked for Steve Anderson, who did your guys' COSA work for several years, and I helped Steve with quite a few aspects of the COSA studies, so I'm familiar with your guys' models and able to kind of keep things consistent with how we've done them in the past. I also work for utilities across the Pacific Northwest. I currently have clients in California, Nevada, Idaho, British Columbia, and actually I have one in Michigan right now too. So do quite a bit of rate work across the West, and also involved in the Bonneville space quite a bit. I'm technical staff for WAPEG to some extent, help Ryan Neal with a lot of issues on rate case stuff and related. So the goal here for this presentation, it's nice you guys got a preview of your budget. And what I've tried to do is incorporate kind of the budget revenue requirement information into what we need for kind of the overall picture for the cost of service study and what you need overall from rates. So my goals are twofold. One, to kind of give a refresher on the cost of service process, and then 2, kind of get some feedback on the overall revenue requirement kind of rate increase you would like us to kind of design rates under. So I'll pause there for any opening comments Harvey or Roger has, and then proceed away.
Nothing here, Russ.
Go ahead, Russ.
Okay, good, you guys. All right, so COSA is a three-step process, and we're really in step one here, determining the revenues you guys need and whether they're sufficient to meet your costs and financial targets. And you just got a good briefing there and some good graphs on your budget. And, you know, that's really what the revenue requirement is in kind of rate analyst speak. It's what you need to get out of rates. Then we do the second step, and I'm a good ways through this, you know, thanks to the help from Harvey and Kurt. We got a lot of good data from Kurt on loads and power costs and the like, and then a lot of good updated budget information from Harvey on what your current budget leanings are. And I assume that might adjust a little bit through your three-step process that you guys have on your budgeting. But overall, we need to kind of settle down what we need to do for rates. The second step here, we do take the COSA and we kind of split those costs into buckets. It's really a bucketing approach. You're bucketing all your costs and then allocating them to different customers based on how they use the system. So the more efficiently they use the system, kind of the more efficiently they should get served by your rates. And then we'll have a rate design phase, and this is where, you know, we heavily involve staff input and we bring proposals back to the board. And you guys have been through the rate design process quite a few times in the past. That's where the regulatory body of a self-regulated utility like Northern Wasco gets to kind of chime in on what they think is appropriate and fair to their membership, and have a little bit of kind of background on good rate making later on in the presentation. This is kind of a graph that kind of shows the bucketing of costs. So we take all the costs, we decide whether they're power supply, transmission, distribution, or other, and then we classify them to whether they're demand or energy or customer related or special assignments. So some of your primary contract customers have some special assignments, so we have to deal with those in the COSA to make sure that their costs aren't being spread amongst other customers and other customers' costs aren't being spread among them. And then we take those costs and we allocate those out to customers based on how they use the system. Here's a kind of refresher on demand. You guys seem like you've gotten quite a bit of good technical information, so demand terminology is probably not new to you. But the short answer on what a kilowatt is versus a kilowatt hour for most boards is you just need a bigger faucet. And that means a bigger line to get power faster out to a service that is larger and has a higher demand at the endpoint. And that affects your costs because if you have to build a bigger faucet or a bigger system, that's going to be more expensive than a smaller system to serve just kind of 1 kilowatt at the endpoint. Okay, so another aspect of that is, and I think you guys have seen this chart before in previous presentations, but the goal is every customer pays based on how they use the system. And you have flatter loads like an industrial load on the right and a residential load on the left. The industrial customer uses the system more efficiently because their average, which is the dotted line, and this is a representative day, 24 hours across, and kW on the other axis. So their average is very close to their peak. So they're using the system a little more efficiently than a typical residential customer who's kind of getting up in the morning, making breakfast, then goes to work and then comes home and you know, starts up everything in the evening. But you still had to meet that 7 kW demand, even though their average was only 2 kW or less. So you still have to build the system, and we take that into account when we're looking at rates. Feel free to interrupt me, anybody there in the room, if you have any questions or comments while I'm going through this. Some of it's probably review, but I'd be happy to have a discussion. Okay, so the next thing that's important here in aligning costs and rates is that the charges you have reflect the cost mix you have. So the two pies here are customer demand and energy. And so the pie on the left is how your rates collect dollars from your customers, and the pie on the right is how your costs, the money you pay out. So you're paying out 55% for energy, but your rate revenue is coming 74% from energy. Your customer charges, and this is probably a testament to some of the previous work you've done with us, your customer costs are pretty close. 15% of your costs are customer related, and 15% of your rate revenue is facilities charge related. So you're doing a pretty good job on your fixed charges. Your demand charges are lower than your demand related costs. So you see 10% of your rate revenue is coming from demand related or capacity related charges. If you think about another way of thinking about demand, and only 30%, but 30% of your costs are coming from capacity and demand driven costs. So ideally, you would want two pies here on this chart that look just like each other, where rate revenues are the same shape of pie as the costs. And that's one of the goals of rate design that we try and get to in the COSA. So I'll pause there. Any comments or questions? Hearing none. Okay, so this is kind of similar to the graph that was shown in your budget package, and we tried to kind of show what's happening over time here to your cost mix. So obviously non-federal power, and that's the largest kind of gray block there below the orange transmission block. That's the part that's increasing the most, but at the same time, your rate revenues are going up in tangent with that. And that's primarily from your contract customers or your primary service customers that are driving that. You do have some modest load growth in your what I would call diversified load or your kind of non-contract primary customers, but those costs haven't gone up much, and you're actually getting a little bit of relief from Bonneville on the federal power side, and then you'll also be taking a little bit less federal power in the out years due to some kind of interpretation changes on your power contract. You also notice here that generation on net costs are going down mostly because of the hydro revenue. So you're getting some good news there on hydro revenue that's reducing costs that you had in the past. And then on the general costs, which are your non-power costs, and these are more kind of the budget costs that you guys control and you get to kind of decide about, you know, they're going up a little bit over time, but fairly gradually. And I'd say the large portion of the increase there is just really needing to fund your capital plan and invest in the system for security and reliability. I'll pause there for a second if Harvey or anybody has any comments they want to make on the overall picture.
No, go ahead, Russ.
Okay, all good. All right. So I took all this information and we put it into our COSA model that we use and try and figure out what the revenue requirement is we need for rates. And so this is kind of the picture that we get out of that. And what it's showing is in 21, well, a couple things I'd say about this. 21 is not finished. So, you know, 21 might not end up being as good or as it looks here. But so far it looks pretty good, especially with the Bonneville kind of coming out with a decrease and some of the other costs being a little less than anticipated, probably because of things you can't spend right now because of the way we have the environment, the work environment out there, and some delays. In 2022, it looks like you're going to need about a 2.8% rate increase. And in 2023, it looks like you need a 1.4% rate increase. And then in 24 and 25, it looks like you're going to be surplus a little bit, but that depends on whether kind of the power costs and the other cost escalations pan out. I have a general 3% escalation on items that kind of weren't in the budget beyond the budget. And then we do use the LRE forecast for power supply and the LRE forecast for loads kind of beyond those points, and then build up from the actual rates you currently have. So the net story here for me is if I had to pick a number for the overall rate increase, I would probably take an average of 22 and 23 and do a 2.1% increase. And that would get you ahead of the future a little bit. You don't know what 24 and 25 are going to be like, but you know, we're hoping for some feedback on that kind of overall picture today. Okay, one thing I did want to talk about a little bit is you have kind of the average rate impact of the different pieces of the pie. And I think this was kind of some of the picture that we were trying to show earlier with the budget pie, but you have most of your cost, at least in 2022, coming from power supply. Your A&G and accounts and services and reserve contributions and other are quite a bit less than that, but all significant. And the areas that you kind of have some ability to kind of tweak with are really, how much you want to spend on capital in one year versus the next. If you're having a good year, you might move some capital spending up, move it back into a future year. You have some flexibility on borrowing, where you could borrow a little more in one year, a little less in another year. That said, anytime you borrow more than your historical trend or your goals, you're at risk of getting behind on equity goals and kind of having to have higher rate increases in the future. Okay, and I've touched on some of this just in the presentation we've already talked about, but you have some tailwinds on BPA power, headwinds from the BPA transmission increase. You have risk mitigation with a non-federal pass-through and a delivery margin on your primary and contract customers. So that helps mitigate risk, especially the reserve margin that you guys collect. I know some co-ops and munis I work with are very concerned about taking a lot of money from a big customer that might not be there and then having a lot of kind of stranded obligations related to that customer. I would say overall, you guys have done a pretty good job of mitigating your risk with the large customers and also not really overcharging them. I think it's important not to overcharge those customers and be competitive with other service areas around you, because there are other places to go for some of those types of customers. You do have some headwinds from inflation, operating cost of labor. Sounds like you're doing a good job of working with your union, but you probably will have some wage increases there after your negotiations. Your capital funding and reserves are important for future stable rates. You don't want to get into a situation where you're behind on that, but there is kind of some discretion there about how much capital funding you want to do beyond kind of really important projects that engineering needs to get done as soon as possible. And then I think there's some uncertainty in the out years with power supply and other requirements. Will Bonneville costs stay low? Bonneville's done a really good job the last two rate cases of keeping costs low, but I don't know that they've quite gotten the pat on the back that they were hoping for this time. And, will they feel like they really need to keep it as tight next time? I don't know. Okay, so trying to get some feedback here and direction for us to kind of work on kind of the overall rates. These are some of the rate change options I had. The 2.1% is kind of my default out of the financial information that's been provided to me and my analysis of it. But the board could do something smaller, say a 1.4% increase this year, and then maybe look at it again next year, or no rate increase at all and do maybe a 3.6% increase in a couple of years. And then I'd be kind of interested if there are other preferences from the board on where to go for the overall. It is important that we do get some direction on what the overall should be, just so that we can kind of design the rates and bring back the rate proposal. I do have a pretty good feel for how the cost allocations are come out and how the costs are going to come out. But I do kind of need to know a little bit about what the overall is going to be. And so anyways, I'll pause there for discussion.
So that's what's kind of before the board right now. He's showing that based off of the factors that we're looking at, he's looking at what would be the going back up to what he mentioned before of a 2.8% rate increase projected for next year. And that's to sustain a couple different things. It's to sustain enough to cover our costs and to cover what we've got for rate funded portion of capital. So right now we've got roughly $3 million right now currently for borrowed funds left. That's from our Cashmere Valley Bank line of credit that we drew, the original 10 million. So we've got about 3 million of it left. We anticipate somewhere around $500,000 $500,000 being used for the balance of the year, which gives about 2.5 for next year. The balance of the 2.5 based on the capital budget or the residual is going to need to be funded from rate funded sources, meaning coming out of our reserves. And in order to sustain that, and then also looking at our reserves, the key piece to our reserves is as our purchase power costs increases, we have a brief period of time where we will pay for those services. We have about a 10 to 20 day period that we will be out that money or float that money, and then we will recover from our customers. During that time, we have to have funds sufficient to cover that difference. As our purchase power costs go up, that fund needs to increase. And so that's why we have a resizing of our reserves and our working capital to ensure that we've got adequate funds to cover that. That's something we typically do in the first week of the first board meeting, board meeting in February. We'll look at that, but that's also trying to be covered in this rate increase. So based on that, looking at 2.8 this year, and then we're going to be looking at 1.4 next year. So he's put before you a couple options. These are not commitments. It's just, do you want to see illustrations of how this could be reflected and what those things could be look like? So we're not asking for a decision. That's not going to be until December on a final rate increase, but we're just looking for some direction on the board to explore or an area to investigate. So questions from the board on that?
Barb, I looked at this at some length, and again, everyone who comes to this board brings back their experience, whether it's in business or whatever. And
right.
I guess because I was in business for 40 plus years, and I dealt with businesses and I dealt with homes and farms and all the rest, there's always an increase of doing business. And if you do not pass that on, you really get behind the 8 ball. And then and for a business, they in turn have to pass that on, or they aren't going to be in business. There's really no sugarcoating around that. And the 2.1% to me is not very much. One of the things that I will be explaining, or actually sharing with my OPUDA meeting, is that when we were talking with Representative Pam Marsh, and she was describing the amount of money that Oregon got, like $2 billion.
Right.
They looked back and they said the average citizen had a 10% increase in income. 10%. What they did with that's beside the point. The way in which we've done it, and we've worked hard to get those reserves up. And I totally understand what you're saying with where we need to go with it. I totally agree with that. 2.1% is not very much. I would much rather, as a PUD, present that now. We don't know what's coming down the pike. It could be much, much worse. And the 3.6 or 4 or whatever by that time could really be a burden. Going back to the numbers we just had from our GM not long ago, we're already in really good stead just from the standpoint of our rates in the first place. So I do not think it would be an exceptional burden. We are always going to have a class of people that struggle. That isn't going to change. If we gave it to them, it's still going to be an issue. But by and large, I do not think that this would be hard for our constituents to accept.
Yeah, I agree with that, and I think it's better to do it now a little bit at a time, rather than wait 2 years in a bigger chunk. Because we also have an inflationary issue going on too. People are starting to feel a crunch. You know, when we go into the grocery stores or the gas pumps or whatever else, everything's going up. And that's going to be a bigger factor as time progresses.
Okay, thank you.
What happens in a couple of years when the COSA says, you know, we're going to need less money? Do they factor in, when he's doing this, does he factor in a 2% increase and then say, oh, well, it'd be negative 3% or negative 1.4 in a couple of years? How does that work? This is my first time going through.
No, it's a great question. Russ,
Yeah,
you want to
no.
go ahead and take that one on?
Yeah, no, so those are annual surpluses or decrease. That's just that individual year, whether you were plus or minus whatever the number is on the bottom. It doesn't reflect, say, if you actually did a rate increase earlier and would have more revenue in the top line. So like the budget, these revenues don't reflect an assumed rate increase. They're just projected on your current rates, and they would obviously go up, and those would be a little different in the out years if you had a rate increase. Does that answer your question? If it didn't, please follow up.
Yeah, no.
And in the event that we would have over collection, those are opportunities I think that we would use to pay off debt early.
Correct. And we have that opportunity.
Well, and I agree with what Roger said. Businesses know that, cost of doing business will increase.
Right.
I disagree that not every business can pass them on. As a farmer,
sure,
I took what I got, and if the markets were great, I did okay. If the markets weren't great, I didn't do well, and I really didn't want to have an increase on you, and I wasn't doing well.
Right.
So it doesn't affect everybody the same way if you're a business owner.
Yeah.
It's just a fact of life. Not every business can pass it on to the consumer.
You're exactly right. Exactly right.
Yeah, I am in favor of the 2.1% for 2 years rather than nothing and then hitting another 3.6. Like that big of a jump will get people a little bit excited.
I know one thing that we realized back in 2017, we did have a significant change, but we hadn't had a rate change for a while. And I think, obviously as business owners, you appreciate the fact that it's probably better to get a smaller gradual increase rather than nothing, 10%. That's hard to business plan around. So I think.
Especially when it was all on the irrigators.
Yeah. Oh, okay. All right.
And I understand because it was out of whack. So I completely understand it, but it doesn't make it feel any better.
Right.
Make it easier.
So what we can do in response to that is we can come back to the board and model in a 2.1% increase as a hypothetical, so that you can see how it affects the metrics and how it affects everything. So I think for us, Russ, and even Kurt on the LRE, it's a takeaway to have that option modeled as a 2.1% increase and see what this looks like when we bring this back in November.
Yeah, no,
consideration. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
The other thing I was looking at is, we're talking 2.1.
Right.
But the other option was 1.4, 1.4 and 1.4. That sounds to me like a 2.8.
Right.
Which is a little bit bigger increase, but it's not as big of a hit each year.
Right.
Yeah, and I think the benefit. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah. No, go ahead, Russ. Go ahead and reply.
I think it's nice to do these 2-year rate increases like you guys have done. I mean, you had a little bigger one 2 years ago, but you hadn't had one in a while. And, doing a 2-year rate increase means you only have to go through kind of all that customer service and communication and redoing your billing system kind of once every 2 years. And I think there's some benefits to doing that too. I do all the inflationary talk. I'm definitely noticing that just buying groceries myself. So I can understand it, but that's also happening on your side with transformer costs and delays and those kind of things that are making things more expensive there. So the feedback I had here, Harvey, is that we can kind of work with the 2.1 as kind of a base assumption for developing some rate proposals and showing the cost allocations and kind of doing the rest of the COSA and bringing it back to the board. And then obviously the board has a discretion to make further changes down the road. So I don't know, anything else? Any other questions? Go ahead.
Yeah, Connie, did you have something?
I agree with doing it less percentage or more often than the one that we had to do in 20.
Right.
Okay. Good point.
And I guess from a standpoint, from a finance standpoint, if you come in if you have a recommended of 2.1 or 1.4, and you have some decreases showing off in the future, if you have a 2.1 now, it gives you a chance to look at what are you really going to look at next year? Is that going to be something less, or you may end up feeling very comfortable next year to say that we're looking good for the next few years. So it gives you that option, and it doesn't put you in that danger of having to overshoot potentially, which you really don't want to do. So, Roger, your thoughts?
Russ hit my comment that we had gotten more comfortable doing the every 2 year. I don't like doing 2 years back to back. It just, there's something about it from a working for the public perspective.
Sure.
But just wanted to remind everyone that we also skipped a year purposefully and carried it because of COVID. So this year, to do one in 22 is probably the most appropriate in order to get back on our normal cycle, recognizing that we're still prioritizing reinvestment in the system. We're still focused on the safe, reliable delivery of electricity, the benefits that the staff showed during the report. This is how we do that.
Right.
In order for us to continue on the plan, this is required. And thank you for your thoughtful support of it.
Well said.
Okay.
Anybody else? I had a few other slides, Harvey, I could go through pretty quick, but go ahead.
Sure, go ahead.
Okay. All right, so I just had kind of a reminder about the district delivery charge. So for the primary contract customer, we have a delivery charge that's actually in place until 23 currently, and we have taken a look at it and it looks like it's functioning the way it should and is about at the right level, but we will kind of take another look at that in this process. And then the next 4 slides I have are really kind of board filtered Bond-Bright principles, principles of good rate making. And so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on these, but if you look through your packet, these are good things to kind of reference back to. There are a couple points on the customer perspective that I think are important. You need to have cost-based and predictable rates. I think those are real important to customers and that they're understandable. I think those are ones to keep an eye on. On the utility stewards perspective, I think the top one there, maintain fiscal responsibility, is real important. And then, stability and predictability, I think, are real important, especially in your guys' business as a not-for-profit entity providing an essential service to your customers. And then the easy to administer is nice when you're thinking about the 2-year rate increase and not doing drastic changes from where you are. So a little preview of kind of what we'll be presenting to you in the next session. We're going to have unit costs for every rate class, and those unit costs will be $kW, kilowatt hour, dollar per customer per month. And so those help us decide whether your rates are aligned with cost of service. Now, given you don't want to make huge changes, usually try to move a little bit towards cost of service, 2.1% towards cost of service, and then get a little closer to where you need to be. Think about the $21 single phase facilities charge and no demand charge compared to kind of your system average here on our first cut. You've got a customer cost of $44 and a demand cost of $6, and your energy is obviously 3.5 cents from Bonneville, but you don't bill 3.5 cents, you bill 5.6 cents or around about. So you're collecting a fair amount of non-energy costs in your energy charge. And that's usually the challenge of or the dilemma of rate design, is kind of getting from where you are to where you want to be with considering your members and the amount of change you're going to subject them to. Okay, and so to wrap up, this kind of summarizes those things I've been saying in the rate design phase that we'll be talking about next time. Move towards recommended coastal levels, consider individual rate schedules. We'll preview the unit costs with the actual rates you have in effect kind of right next to them so you can see what that is, and then kind of what the billing impacts will be if you make a change to that. The one thing to keep in mind is that it is important to kind of move away from energy charges generally as the grid modernizes. Energy is going to be less valuable compared to capacity and to some of the other services you provide. So if you get stuck charging a lot of your customers, mostly on energy. You're not going to be as prepared for electric vehicles, for higher penetrations of net metering and that kind of thing. So you do want to kind of look at kind of increasing that demand or capacity component of your rate design overall. So, and that is all I have, everybody. And I really appreciate everybody's patience and time and attention. You guys asked some good questions there.
I'd like to make a comment before Russ leaves. I think this is one of the most helpful and informative processes that we go through as a board in terms of the decisions we make. You know, it's great to read back to that information again, whether it be a yearly or every other yearly basis, because it's so relevant. And I just think it's great. And thank you, Russ, for putting it all together.
I appreciate that. That's very kind.
So Russ, just stick with me just for 1 second. So for next board meeting, what we're going to show you is a breakout on customer class by customer class, and then also looking at, as he's talked about, the customer charge, the demand charge component that to applicable customers, as well as the energy charge. And as you noticed in those pie graphs, a lot of the revenue is driven by energy costs, but when you looked at what the cost driver was, it tended to be much more, we weren't really collecting on the demand side of it. So you're going to see some, in addition to see in the rate increases, you'll see a feathering in as part of the alignment process, better aligning energy costs with demand costs for some of our customers. So you'll see some of that movement so that you're really capturing the revenue from where the cost driver really is. And that sends the right signal to a customer so that they understand what they're really managing in terms of their costs. Is that a fair way to say that, Russ? All right,
Enough talking.
All right, that's what we got. Thank you so much, Russ. Appreciate it.
Thanks, you guys. I think I will drop off, but appreciate listening to the meeting. You guys are doing a good job there. We'll talk to you next time.
Thanks, Russ.
Montana, he's probably, is it an hour difference?
Yep. I'll tell you what, it's not better.
What happens when you travel?
That was a choice.
It was self-inflicted. I totally agree, and I absolutely loved the experience. It was great. So for this is going to go fairly quickly, but I wanted to show you the results of what we had for the risk inventory. This is something we're doing now annually. We did our first one in February of last year, right before the pandemic, and then we did another one subsequent later in the year in August. And that was just to see how much it had changed, and it had changed quite a bit. The good news right now for our rate that this year's risk inventory we did in the month of August, and we did see some changes. And I just want to kind of pop to the next slide. And so we're going to look at a comparison of really what has occurred, you know, what's changed between 2020 and 2021. I did put that we have a new feature, and it's the Risk Management Committee. And those are members from each, at a staff level, from each of the 5 divisions. And then we have a separate one for IT, because IT carries its own special component to it. So we want to make sure there was a representation from IT. And that's really, we just started that on April 8th. We meet once a month. There's a lot of cross-sharing. And it's the important piece of this is it's ingraining risk culture at the staff level. It's great at the board level. It's nice at the executive level and management. It needs to be at the staff level too. And they need to be able to have a hand in that process. So when we conducted our risk management, our risk inventory survey this year, each division manager was accompanied by their representatives who are on the RMC who gave that additional feedback to that process at a staff level. So the people who actually have their hands into the risk are part of that process. We had a much more robust process this year. We have ongoing risk training and awareness. We've had some fun guest speakers. Next month, we're going to have Julie Ryan who's works with Aethers Consultants. She also teaches at the Willamette University. She also does a lot of risk management consulting for NWPPA. And she's going to be she offered for free to come speak to our group this month And the specific topic is about the mitigation plans to risk. And so I've invited EMT to be able to participate in that process. You're welcome to come see it, but it's really focused on, you've got all these things in place, you've looked at it, how do you really manage that mitigation process and what do you do? So we've also had Jeff Griffin come speak to us as well. So we've got some really good training that's really helping us get even stronger at risk management. On the next slide, just kind of some, it's good to kind of keep an eye on all of the different types of risks. We have the top 10 risks that we like to focus on because you can't focus on every single risk efficiently. So you look at what is really critical to the district and could really hurt the district. Then we have other assessed risk, and we'll take a look at those. And then there's just risks that don't get assessed, but they're always talked about. They're always out there. And so you just want to be aware of what those are. So on the next slide, this is really showing at a level, and I think you've got this in your packet, comparing the top 10 that we had and assessed last year at the same time compared to what we had this year. And really one of the bigger features to this is the fact that the total average risk score for all of it dropped, which means that, which really is in this case reflects the fact that a lot of work had gone into managing these risks down, and that's a good sign. So the average risk score did drop, but we did have new things pop up. So ransomware, business continuity from loss of data access continued to be a concern this year for ransomware. We called it ransomware risk, so we started to get a little more specific. In that conversation with Jeff's group, we talk about the subject. What are we currently doing? Everything that you're seeing that came through on the IT security policy addresses significant issues related to this. And then also on the insurance side is looking to increase our claims coverage, our insurance coverage on these issues. So right now, we currently have about $100,000 of coverage for if we got into a ransomware situation, which clearly is not enough to really cover the issue. So we're working with Wilson Airgood, Jeff Griffin's group, our insurance broker, on ways we could increase that up to $2 million. That's significant. It would cost us somewhere between $15,000 and $20,000 to cover that with an insurance policy each year. But the fact that it just looms out there is something that could always happen to us. And special districts are an increasing target for this type of activity. It's just something that it's prudent for us to start doing. And the other thing that I'll give credit to is the fact that as I have to fill out these claims, so I'm looking at 4 different vendors, I had to fill out all their information. They wanted to know, do you have multi-factor authentication? Do you have all these things? Do you have training? What's your security process? Do you have an audit process? Do you look at these things? Some of this, there's most of that was stuff that we've already had in place, but also part of that IT security policy that's being put into place are things that your insurer is going to require. They require of us. And so it's perfectly timely what we're doing on that part for risk management. So the prevention piece of it, and then also the claims piece of it for the financial damage in the background gives us that coverage. So I thought I would look at that. Any questions on that? I'm going to keep going. This is just a nice graphical representation coming up next, and this is a heat map. Obviously, it's got likelihood and impact. Top right is going to be bad. That's dangerous. That just means you got high likelihood for the high impact. And you can see where last year at this time were a number of these risks, and it kind of collect up in that corner. Our top 10, there was nothing down in the green. They're all yellow and up into the red. And that's just kind of an example. On the next slide, you'll see you only have one that's up in the red, and that's ransomware. One of the things about the ransomware is, in talking with Jeff's group, just by adding multi-factor authentication, that starts to drop into the light green, just with that. And there's really very little cost associated with that piece of it. adding on the additional insurance piece of it, you start to really pull that back into the green. So we were able to quickly address that. And then you'll look at the rest of them and they're all in the yellow and even into the light green. And that is your top 10. So it's not saying that we're not capturing stuff. We actually were even more rigorous this year, dredging up and looking at what are all of our risks. And this is just where we're starting to fall out. So the news is good. It's just showing that, you know, the district is really aware of the risks and we're addressing the risks, we're managing the risks, and we're starting to get them back to where they need to be. So, and there's been fantastic conversations involved with that. And we had some of those conversations with the Audit Risk Committee that directors Howe and Jacobson are on, and Council Foster is in. So that's good news too. I'll come to the last one here. Second. And then the next one for the full inventory, it's a little hard to read here, but this is, we assessed a total of 21. Last year we assessed 23. This year we assessed 21. There are things that did move around on this a bit, and we'll take a look at that trend in the next slide. Next slide. So overall, total risks have been reduced. We have another interesting thing is we have the emergence of risks that just kind of floated up from the bottom that have high risk impact, but very low likelihood. And that's a good thing. That means you've got some very dangerous things that are out there, but they're very well managed. The key issue there, and the key issue is if we were to go back, could you just flip back to that heat map real quick? Go back one more. Okay. For the ones that are in that bottom right-hand corner, they're high on impact, but they're low on likelihood because they are very well managed. And we've got a cluster of them. But what it also is the takeaway from a risk standpoint is we have to continue to keep an eye on those. And we have to continue to manage those and be aware of any change or change in the trends, the regulations around that, or any movement of it. So it's this continuous awareness. The more that we're aware, the more that we build that risk culture in, and the more that we stay on those mitigation processes, they stay down there. But they're just ones that you just cannot take your eye off of very long because they have high impact if for instance, they did get out of hand. So you want to go back down, sorry. I'm going to flip you around here, right there. The other thing is there are some specific areas that are trends. Business continuity still remains a high risk. We look at that from the big scary. We call it the big, Roger calls it the big scary, but it's the emergency issues. It's going to be what Jeff's done on wildfire mitigation plans, our pandemic response, a lot of the bigger issues that in the event that we have a disruptive event, can we continue essential operations for our customers? And that's what business continuity is the ability to continue critical operations during a major disruptive event. Cybersecurity is still a high risk. Staffing remains a high risk in terms of availability. That's a concern with the pandemic. An issue that came up during conversation is, and it's an increasing topic right now, and that is mandating vaccination, where you may have some population that has a concern about that, and certain people. You're hearing about it more in the news. It could actually affect us to a certain degree, or the utility industry. If it's certain employees may feel strongly about that and may resist getting if a mandate came through to have a vaccine, it could become a concern on how you best manage that. Or if they actually do get sick. So availability is going to be a critical issue. And then with retirements and transition of employees, keeping knowledge transfer going, being able to, as experienced staff retire and move on from the district, retaining that knowledge within the district. And we manage that through our SOPs, our cross training, and ways that we manage that risk. Purchasing cost control is an emerging risk. It's just something we're becoming more aware of. But that's also something that you notice was in the strategic plan to address, is managing that process by a more standardized process, a more structured process, and being aware of that. And then we have an aging enterprise system with our UPN that manages our financial information, our customer information, and then interfaces with our engineering program system of Futura as well. So it's a dated system. It was created back in the 70s. All of our customer database information resides on COBOL, which is a pretty old database system. It's not SQL. What it does is it hampers our ability to get good information out of it. We do get adequate information. We have some very resourceful, gifted people who find ways to get that information out. So we have good budget actual reports and other financial information. But you really have to continue to work with that. And so we're looking to start the process here. It's in the capital budget to look at a successor to our current UPN system. And then finally, just repeated themes from conversations, just the need to continue to define and more strictly define and standardize our processes such as purchasing. Been conversations on billable work orders. Great conversations with that, making a lot of strides there. It's a critical piece of work that we do, and we need to ensure that we recapture our costs there, and that's going really well. Cybersecurity and data security. It's not just losing the data; it's just ensuring that you still have access to it, and that's one thing that happens in ransomware. Third-party vendor risk continues to kind of loom out there, and that is, we may manage our risks, but the people we depend on, how well do they manage their risks? Because a risk to them can become indirectly a risk to us. So it's something we need to be aware of. And then, as you're aware of, as you go to all the alphabet soup meetings, there's continuous legal and regulatory changes. So it happens all the time, and it can happen in a flash. And I know Cindy gets to see it front and center too, as well as seeing all the changes, and it happens very quickly. So
Solutions looking for problems.
Good summary.
And with that, I will end it and bring it back to the board for questions.
Harvey, if I can jump in.
Absolutely, please do.
Comment on the ERP system, recognizes that as a vendor system.
Yeah.
CDC, UPN, now called Meridian. The district started the relationship with them in 2005-ish.
2011.
11.
Yeah.
So we're working with them as one potential solution provider, but they're not the only ones in the marketplace. So that's part of that evaluation program, isn't that Northern Wasco County PUD has a global system. It's that the vendor that we selected has one, and that's what we're using.
Correct.
Just nuance there.
No, excellent. No, it's not an internal system. Any concerns that you have as a board? Concerns that when you hear this, things that kind of still linger for you?
What I like best is that we're proactive, and I just don't think you can beat that, and we are. So, and the other thing that we talked about it on our meetings, this thing is a living document.
It is.
It's a change, and that's fine, as long as we recognize it and make appropriate changes. It's not like, well, we're done now, because reality is you never will be.
No, because the environment around you doesn't stop. It doesn't stop changing.
Run to fail is a choice. We're choosing to not make it. And that's with any aspect or program within the organization. We're not going to wait for the negative consequence to materialize. We're going to be proactive to resist it.
Right, exactly. What's your comfort level? Are you feeling comfortable right now with what you're hearing? Uncomfortable? Or comfortable if you keep staying on it?
Because almost everything's moved down into the green.
It's a good sign.
There's a lot less chance of that bullet hitting us.
Right.
And as you said, just a couple of cost-effective changes with the one that's deep into the red, and it pulls it down into the green too. So I feel comfortable. I'm impressed that we've been able to mitigate a lot of these risks and bring them down into a zone where they appear to be more manageable.
Yeah.
Harvey, I think the other thing that was very wide is having the cross communications that we didn't really have before, where everybody can share, whether it's someone who's new or been here a long time, and that's where you pick up stuff.
Right.
So my question, Harvey, is a lot of the processes and things that we do in the district, setting rates, our financial systems, which we have audited every year.
Correct, right.
Is there any sense that there's a benefit to having our internal analysis of risk evaluated by an external party? In other words, are we looking at things, and we do that all the time in all in lots of areas of the district, or are there organizations out there or people out there who will come in and say, you guys really missed something here.
Right.
Or you guys are you're looking through rose-colored glasses. You're really not dealing with this risk.
Right.
I think you are. You satisfied yourself you are, but maybe you're not.
It's a good point, and it's a good question.
And I don't know whether there is or not, but it seems to me that to the extent we become self-evaluators, we take some risk right there of maybe not evaluating as objectively as we could. And I'm not trying to make a.
Oh, no, it's an excellent point. So can I share with you what we've done? Or go ahead.
Just to take up, one of the things that I was just thinking of is, if there's not an organization, well, there kind of is, and that's the GMs that have a specific meeting for that topic.
So if I can expand just a bit, because I think I heard you and understand where the question was coming from. So part of the risk management committee, having the outside folks come in, like our insurance provider and specifically like Julie and folks that do this around the region and in this sector, it is to have that share of like, hey, this is what we think, this is the policy that we're using, this is what we refer to as significant or acceptable risk, what have you, is that knowledge share.
So there's an analysis, you're expecting an analysis and we would expect that from our insurance agent.
Right.
And,
Right.
And which.
So what I was going to get to is just what do we currently do? So, I mean, obviously we have that part of it. When we've designed this program, and periodically, I will have conversations and share this information with Julie. She actually is a consultant to us. So she is that third party that does review what we do. How do we look at our risks? What are we looking at? How do we score it? Better yet, and then for her point, and I think even you touched on this, Jim, that is, how do you really manage your mitigation plans? How detailed are they? How do you follow up with that? And that is why she's coming to speak to us here coming up this month. So we have that. We do have Jeff, who has been part of this process and been pretty deep in part as we develop this. We also will we cross-share information across districts. So for just among the Oregon PUDs, we share information constantly about what kind of risks are you facing. Here's what we're going through. We're going to have a conversation. I'm going to have a conversation coming up here with another PUD, Oregon PUD, coming up here in a couple of weeks, because they're starting their program because their program has been very focused around purchase power, and they're trying to expand that. So actually, they're coming to us for some of that information to help them with that. So, but we do continually consult with us.
Yeah, two responses to that. Number one, I wasn't aware, and I'm not sure the board was aware that Julie was doing that.
Yeah.
Which I think is really positive. And number two, there's a certain amount of proof in the pudding, and we talked about this at the meeting.
Yeah.
In that you take 2020's analysis of what those risks were, and in fact, action was taken with respect to some or all of those.
Right.
And that's why they're not on the list anymore.
Right.
It's because by identifying things and by having the processes you've done, you actually do more than just put a list on the wall and then walk away from it.
Absolutely.
You put a list on the wall, then you do something about it.
Absolutely. You have to.
And I think all of what you were saying is, yes, some of the other Oregon PUDs, I think you were specifically mentioning Emerald, because they're going to come visit next month. We went first in development and evolution of our enterprise risk management policy. There's becoming more of a requirement from at least just the insurance sector. So two of them specifically are going to try to model ours. That doesn't mean it's perfect. You know, you've heard me
It's a place to start.
ad nauseum say that continuous improvement is just part of what we do. this is the program today, it'll likely be a little different next year, and hopefully these are all continued, not just differences, but improvements.
Right.
So, comfortable with that.
Is this fee-based, information that we're gonna pass on?
It's all circular, because, there's things that we borrow from them, goes around, goes around.
That's,
Exactly.
that's why the OPUDA is very helpful for all of us.
But we do. It really is, the value of that cooperation, the value of that cross-sharing, the value of that information is worth more than we would ever charge in any fee.
Of course.
It really is.
Which is why our wildfire mitigation plan looks a lot like theirs, because they went first.
All right. Well, thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right.
Tired of shit.
Okay, you guys are in charge of that.
Not me.
Okay, the, consideration of a funding request from the Wall Dogs Mural Fest.
So we have no one here, but Nikki, sent a letter, because she is the chairman of, or the chair of the committee. I did give you under your agenda, because I asked Nikki on Friday when she sent it to me, if I could, get what contributions have been made. But we were provided with a listing of who has committed to secure funding from, but there's no dollars associated with that list. So I did send her back an email today saying, can you get me some dollar amounts? And I have not heard back from her. But, so anyway, in talking to David, Benko, I think he might have been the originator of thinking about having the Wild Dogs come to our community. But it's a big project. They have a lot of, well, they have a large committee. I think you saw on that, the letter from Nikki, it showed the people that are on the committee. And this shows those that have been endorsed. But I know in talking to David, there was even some cherry, growers that were talking about offering their picker cabin, for the painters that come, the people that will be painting the mural. So anyway, so this is their first fight. When, David first talked to me, they realized that they had missed the economic development grant application, process, because we had just made a vote in July, when I think it was later in, July. And so anyway, so they're trying to gather all this, a lot of resources to, come in and have a lot of murals painted. There was also a flyer listed if any of you wanted to go on and vote what mural you think we should have painted in our community. And so anyway, they are looking for pretty much any kind of, funding assistance that the PD would like to offer. I think she noted in there too, if we do donate, we will be listed as a sponsorship, providing some services. And then Nikki, she provided a different level of, if you provide this level of funding, what you can get for it. But I know in talking with David, I had told him about our economic development grant program and that it was all based on infrastructure, 5 years or more. It had to be capital and not for supplies. He mentioned the paint that they will be using is like 40-year paint. I've never heard of a 40-year paint. So,
Mind if I just, okay. So what I think I understand is this entity is looking for an opportunity to bring, these murals to the community for a multitude of reasons. For those of us that live here, for assist in the opportunities when folks get off the tour boats to walk around and have things to see. Kathy shared with us 11 other entities, both public and private or quasi-governmental, that have committed. But what they're really looking for is that top sum number, the 20,000. That's the total. That's not per organization. That's the big component, as I understand it. So however that gets divided up amongst the entities that are willing, they're not trying to ask the PUD for $20,000.
that I'm not sure of, because it sounds like it's gonna be quite costly because, the painters are doing it for free, but they're trying to find housing for them, food. So there's a lot of stuff to feed these people as they're here and then the supplies. But we could find out more and bring it back because this is August of next year. The reason when I had first talked to David that if they were looking at something to get it in soon, because we were gonna be going through the budget process, because we had missed the economic development grant, application process. So anyway, that is why that's before you, because I said, well, you know, we do have budget, you know, the board will be considering adopting the budget. But I can try to get more information to make it more clear, but I think it's over the 25,000, the cost. And I could be wrong.
The general manager sees no direct nexus between the request and our core business.
Exactly.
So I can't, in good faith, make a budgetary line item recommendation to the 22 budget for any of this. If there's an opportunity for the entity to come back and ask for a piece of special funding for something, for the good, like public good, what have you, that's different. We do, I'm looking for public affairs things, sometimes like $200 for signs at the sports park. Sure. Those
And
small.
I put in the last 3 years, you have the lapse of the pandemic, but I got a nice-sized budget in anticipation of helping the police department start a national night out campaign every year.
Right.
But that's kind of a one-time thing. Let's help you, I'll help you guys kick it off, and then you gotta run it.
National Night Out?
Yeah, and we can have that conversation offline as far as.
I could have one of those.
So again, I can't, in good faith, make a budget line item recommendation for this amount. If the board chooses to do whatever it chooses to do, it's fine.
I agree 100%.
I agree. Yeah, I agree also. I'd like to see more information, who's submitted how much already, and what they think the total project will be.
Well, once we start that, guess what, ladies and gentlemen?
Everyone's coming to it.
Yeah.
That's exactly right.
I don't think you have statutory authority to do it anyway.
Thank you, Mr. Foster.
We're gonna get a wet blanket.
I knew you were.
Well, I wanted to wait to see what the general manager.
Yeah, specific mission.
And if something falls within that mission, I don't have a problem with it, but every Tom, Dick, and Harry comes knocking on the door, that's when you want to get to it.
If the mural needs to be lighting, that's different.
One of the murals has Northern Wasco PUD sign in the.
On my building.
Yeah. Flashes.
Okay.
That's it.
Okay, so we'll get more information and look at it and let it sit there.
Let's get out of here.
Okay, Outage report.
Okay, Scott, this is, we're part of an organization called the Oregon Public Utility District Association. There's 6 of us that meet monthly, and the first group that is a lobbyist, it's a Romaine group, they had a guest speaker for a while. Her name was Representative Pam Marsh from Ashland and Jackson County, and she was there primarily to receive her Rock Solid Award, which the OPUDA organization gave to her. And then she shared some specific things, in particular, how rough 2021 was. As she said, it started off with violence in the state office, then COVID, quarantines, ice storms, and fires. It was a rough year. The state did receive $2 billion from the federal government, and as I mentioned before, they looked back and they said it looked like there was a 10% increase in income for most state citizens. And there are literally still hundreds of people living in hotels from all the fires, either they haven't rebuilt or bought or gone anywhere else yet. And it looks like there's still going to be plenty of money for renewable energy for the PUDs in the future. And Scott, you'll like this. She said, broadband is now a necessity for Oregon, which we obviously agree. And at this particular time, they're also in the middle of redistricting, and hopefully there'll be a quorum, and they're obviously working on that now. They're still working on wildlife mitigation. On some side notes, the PUDA annual conference is still going to be set for next September in Astoria. And the new meeting, instead of Fridays, starting January 22, will be Thursdays. At this point, it's still virtual, and we'll go from there. A BPA group did not have much to share. They mentioned, Brian from Transmission said they're still not traveling to other utilities, and they have to have mandatory vaccines for everyone by November 22nd. So we'll see how that goes. And it looks like the new rates are about 10 to 12% increase next year. Claire, in her power portion, mentioned that they ended the fiscal year very strong, and the last thing she mentioned was they should have a forecast next month for what La Nina looks like through the computer models for what our snow and rain will look like for Oregon. That's all I've got.
Okay. Any questions, Roger, with the PUD? There being none? Okay, we'll go to future meetings. Staff, you're welcome to leave. I don't think you need to be around for the meeting dates.
We've already done it.
Okay, so we did have one thing came up. So, at the PUD meeting, they were talking about that Jeff Griffin and would get around to every, organization with the GM and meet with the board members. So Lauren sent me an email this morning, asking about Thursday of next week, the 14th, for a breakfast meeting with Roger and a member of our board. So meeting with, a breakfast meeting with Jeff Griffin and Lauren. So they wanted to try to get it scheduled before the next PUD meeting. So I talked to Wayne at dinner, and he is not available, so I would assume that Wayne will appoint someone if they're available.
Is anybody interested in having dinner with Jeff? Breakfast, excuse me.
This was the GM and your insurance agent.
Yep.
Let me guess, with someone with a background maybe of insurance?
That might be good.
I don't wanna go.
When is it? 21st?
Thursday the 14th, and I don't have a time. It would be sometime in the morning because it's breakfast, but Lauren has not responded.
10 o'clock sounds good to me.
Are you available?
That's not breakfast then.
I'll do
We
it.
need to reclassify.
Yeah, 14.
Roger will do it.
You gotta get breakfast when I do it, but I get breakfast about 5:30.
Man, forget it. I go potty and go back to bed.
We'll send you.
Yeah.
Okay,
And I'll let you
definitely.
know the minute I hear, Roger.
Ma'am, you'll let me know?
Yes.
Where will it be?
I thought this was gonna be.
That's another question. It will be
They'll let you
somewhere
know.
here in town. They're coming here.
Okay. Yep.
We will tell them to
We'll find out.
Yeah, Susan's will be
This
good.
conference is no longer being recorded.
make things back.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, every policy